But how do you make her stay and listen to all you say? How do you keep a wave upon the sand? Oh, how do you solve a problem like Maria? How do you hold a moonbeam in your hand?
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore the themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker, directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, host, voiceover artist here in San Diego, California.
And this week on the Cine-Files, we are jumping into what many people describe as one of the greatest movie musicals of all time. It is also the movie that knocked out a almost 30-year box office champion, which is Gone with the Wind, to become the biggest box office movie in history. And that film is Robert Wise's Sound of Music.
Yeah. And this is my first time watching it, discussing it with anyone, talking about it. I watched it in preparation for our possible 3-part exploration of this movie, because it is a 3-hour film. It's on Disney Plus. And it looks like the version they have is like the 4K high-end HD version. So this was a gorgeous way to watch the movie at my house on my LG OLED TV. And this is going to be quite a discussion we're going to have on this movie and what goes on in this film, you know?
It's so funny because I hadn't really focused on just how beautifully filmed this movie is until this time, where I'm just having that experience that we've had in other films like Godfather or Seven Samurai or Lawrence of Arabia, where every shot I'm going, man, that's a beautiful shot. Man, that's a beautiful shot. That's a beautiful shot. But before we jump into that, we should say to everyone that the best way to support the Cine-Files and keep the films running is through patreon.com/thecine-files. We have all sorts of tiers, including having ad-free versions of the show, listening to our Cine-Files short. I literally just posted one just now on a discussion of what exactly is an alpha. And you can also join our advisory board, see combined episodes where we put 2 or 3-part episodes together, ask questions about the films, all sorts of stuff on patreon.com/thecine-files. And you can also support the show through Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple person, and that will give you ad-free versions of the show, as well as access to our Cine-Files short. So lots of good stuff there for you to help out the show.
Absolutely. And, another way you can help out the show is if, you listen to our ad breaks, you hear some fine sponsors of our content here on the Cine-Files. And the great way to keep them sponsoring our show is to sign up for the products that they're offering for you all using our code. And of course, it's only if these are products that appeal to you, these are services you want to use. We are certainly not here to shill for anybody, but certainly we approve these products. We take a look at these products. Sometimes they get sent to us. We get to use them. And so we definitely stand behind the people who support us here on the Cine-Files. So if you hear about something in one of the ads that you want to try out or use, we'd appreciate you using our code so that it inspires them to keep supporting us here on the Cine-Files.
Normally I ask, how did you come to the film? But obviously I kind of know the answer. Here's what I would like to ask instead.
Yeah.
How long ago did you finish this film?
I finished this film about an hour ago or 2 hours ago. Yes. So still very fresh in my mind, still very much a film I'm looking forward to discussing. And, we break this film down over multiple parts. And so that'll allow me to go and rewatch it again before we talk about our second part. And then possibly into our third part. But yeah, I'm fresh off finishing the movie earlier today. I broke it up in a couple of viewings so I would have a fresher mind about it.
So you are basically the complete polar opposite of my experience, because I have seen this movie so many times and it is so deep in my consciousness that I couldn't tell you when I first saw it.
Oh, wow.
Because this is one of those movies. It wasn't exactly like the 10 Commandments that always aired around Easter time or Wizard of Oz, but it was an annual showing, I think, on NBC, and I watched it almost every year since I was a little kid. So I've seen it a ton. And then I have to say, when we're trying to prep for these shows, I have like a Blu-ray and I had different Blu-rays, and I'm listening to commentary tracks and looking at documentaries. And this is why we kept having delay when we were starting this, because I kept finding it ended up I had 2 different Blu-rays of this disc, and they had a totally different set of bonus features. And I found like, oh, there's 7 more documentaries I haven't watched.
Right.
And many of them were like an hour and a half each. Yeah. And so I still haven't watched everything. There's still more stuff that I was like, look, I've seen enough. This is as far as we're going to go. Yeah. So I'm deep into knowledge of this film, both historically and like growing up with it. So we're coming, and this is fantastic. You are coming completely with fresh eyes, seeing this for the first time. Yeah. And I'm coming for like, this is a member of my family that has been around forever.
Yeah. I mean, when it's the first time watching something, I don't do as much of the research on my own side of things.
Right.
Because I want to just talk about it fresh and discover it with you. Kind of like Brief Encounter. If people want to go back and listen to that, how we explored that together. Because obviously I trust your points of views and trust where we're going with our conversation. But with other films, which I have much more investment in, I absolutely try to read as much as I can on it, watch as many times as possible, so I can have some points of views coming in that we can discuss. So I kind of like these occasional breaks where it's a movie I don't have to spend as much time researching, and I can just sit and have the conversation with you about it and get schooled at the same time as I'm offering my own points of views and having discussions about it with you. So it's great.
I mean, the main way, yes, it's, we obviously this is a show for the Cine-Files, which means the people listening to this show are people who want to learn a lot about movies and know a lot about how they got made or the other information. But the main way of seeing movie is to sit down knowing nothing and just watch the movie.
Yeah.
Like that's the main point, And if that stuff doesn't work, then all the other stuff isn't important, Right. So a little bit of pre-production. Obviously, this is based loosely on a true story of the Von Trapp family singers, who are a real singing group who toured all around the world. They had moved to the United States in the late 30s, right as World War II is getting started.
Yeah.
And they, were on the radio, they were on TV. And then I will give more details about their history later on, but I want to point out one thing, which is what they ended up doing was they settled in Vermont and ended up opening up a lodge where they performed and people came to stay at the lodge. And Georg actually started running the very first cross-country ski resort in the United States of America. And people from all over the Northeast would come to this ski resort, including a young, avid 12-year-old skier from Montreal named Christopher Plummer. And that 12-year-old skier met Maria von Trapp, the Baroness, when he was a little kid, which I just think is an amazing thing considering that he ends up playing Georg later on. Unfortunately, Georg passed away and they weren't getting as many gigs and people weren't really coming to the inn. And so Maria decided to write her autobiography, which she does. She writes her life story and sells it to a movie producer. They sell the right for $9,000. Thing is, this was not an American movie producer. This was a West German movie producer. And they make a movie based on the lives of the Von Trapp family singers in Germany in 1956. And it is a huge, huge hit. I never knew this.
And we should clarify for people, Steve, we have to be, some of the younger listeners might not know that there was ever a thing like East Germany and West Germany, right? And so when Steve stresses the fact that it was a West German producer, back after World War II, Germany eventually was split into East Germany and West Germany. East Germany being the communist side of things, West Germany being the not communist side of things. So a West German producer getting access or getting the story makes sense. I don't think an East German producer would necessarily do this story because of what happens in it. So this is something that in the 1950s people had to contend with and deal with when it came to the country of Germany.
So
countries of Germany. Yeah,
exactly. So it's a huge, huge hit. And I've seen a little bit of footage of it. And there are parts of it, like I've seen them marching down the stairs with the whistle and all that stuff. That's very much in it. The music is all Austrian folk songs, the kind of Austrian folk songs sung by the Von Trapp family singers. Makes perfect sense. They end up doing a sequel. These two Von Trapp family films were the biggest box office hits in West Germany in the 20 years after World War II. Wow. These were massive, massive hits. So now it comes back to the U.S. and Paramount buys the rights to make a movie musical starring Audrey Hepburn. Which is funny just because Audrey Hepburn basically steals Julie Andrews' part because Julie Andrews played My Fair Lady on Broadway and they did not cast her. And not casting Julie Andrews in My Fair Lady allowed her to play Mary Poppins. And of course, Audrey Hepburn came in and played My Fair Lady. But then that all falls apart. And then somebody goes, you know what? This thing would make a really good vehicle for a Broadway show for Mary Martin. So they bring Mary Martin in and she says yes. And she goes, you know what we could use though? I love the show. We could use at least just one new song. We got to have one new song. And so she goes to her good buddies, Oscar Hammerstein and Richard Rodgers, the two most successful musical composers and lyricist creators in Broadway history, because she had done Sound of Music and King and I and all sorts of stuff with them, and says, hey, would you guys be willing to write a song for this? And they said, no, but we'd be willing to write an entirely new show with all our songs.
Wow.
And they go, okay. The interesting thing is they had the book, which is what you call the script for a musical, had already been written by Howard Lindsay and Russell Crouse. So this ends up being the only Rodgers and Hammerstein musical that they weren't in total control of writing the whole thing. Because they didn't write the book.
So the story must have really appealed to them. And the challenge of bringing their songs to this story must have been a unique situation for them at that time. Because as you said, they were so well established. So I'm sure there's a challenge here to try and play within another person's sandbox, but still claim your area of the sandbox. Yeah.
So The Sound of Music opened on November 16th, 1959. It was a huge hit. It ran for 1,443 performances. It won 6 Tonys, including Best Musical. I think Mary Martin won as well. By the way, the guy who was playing Rolf in the original music, after a few months, he had to leave. I don't know if he had another gig or whatever. And the actor that came in to replace him is a young John Voight.
Oh, wow.
Came to play Rolf with Mary Martin.
I didn't even know John Voight could sing.
Wow. I have no idea.
Never done a musical that I've seen.
Richard Zanuck, who has now taken over Fox, brings in Ernest Lehman to write the screenplay. Now, Fox Studios was in deep, deep trouble at this era. They had flop after flop after flop, and then they went, oh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put all our money on the line on one of the most expensive films ever made, and that is Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor, and it just totally, totally bombs.
And there's another version of Cleopatra being made currently now in pre-production, and so we'll see if that one bombs in the end.
As I said, he brings in Ernest Lehman, and Ernest Lehman, this is a great screenwriter who wrote North by Northwest, this Sweet Smell of Success. He wrote the screenplay for The King and I, screenplay for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Hello Dolly, Family Plot, and most importantly for this film, he wrote the screen version of West Side Story.
Oh, yeah.
We should say, by the way, Richard Zanuck, man, one of the most successful. He's the studio head. Daryl Zanuck is his father, and he leaves Fox. Richard Zanuck is the guy who saves Fox, who brings it back with films like The Sound of Music. And then we've been talking about him a bunch lately because he was the producer on The Sting. He was the producer on The Verdict. He was and of course, the producer of Jaws. So this guy had hit after hit after hit after hit.
Yeah.
Extremely powerful guy. And he's talking with Ernest Lehman, and they're saying, well, who should we get to direct this movie? And Lehman says, well, obviously we should get Robert Wise. I worked with him on West Side Story. He's the guy to get. Unfortunately, Robert Wise is in pre-production for The Sand Pebbles.
All right.
And says, sorry, fellas, I can't do it.
It's a Steve McQueen war film. Yeah.
Yeah. So now they go after other directors. Here are some of the directors that turned this movie down.
Okay.
Stanley Donen.
Oh.
George Roy. Yeah. George Roy Hill. And then you'll love this last one, Gene Kelly.
I'm kind of okay that Gene Kelly turned this one down. No offense to Gene. Not the greatest of directors, certainly the greatest of performers, but maybe not the greatest of directors. And George Roy Hill, that would be the George Roy Hill version of Sound of Music might be a little bit darker than what, even though the one is there are darker elements to the one we got, but Robert Wise seems like the logical choice of all the people you just mentioned. I mean, Stanley Donen, I think, would have been a nice, interesting choice, but Stanley didn't always veer towards dark stuff himself. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because the darkness, how much darkness is one of the key artistic considerations throughout this whole film.
I'm sure.
So Lehman goes, well, you know who one of my favorite directors, and I think they were friends, is William Wyler. Obviously, a fantastic director.
Of course.
And he calls up Wyler and says, listen, let me take you to see the Broadway show. So he takes him to the Broadway show. Wyler absolutely hated it. He said it is too sweet. It's treacle. I'm not interested in this at all. And then he finally said, listen, how would you like a free trip to Salzburg? And basically says, why don't you come and we're going to scout locations. And he and Lehman go to Salzburg. And Weiler said, okay, I guess I'll do the movie. I mean, I guess I'll do it.
Wow.
I don't know what he was doing at the time. And so they head off to Salzburg. And Salzburg for Lehman really solidified his understanding of the film. Like it was hugely important for him in terms of writing the screenplay. And you can see how important this location is to this film.
Right.
But William Wyler doesn't seem all that interested. He's kind of doing other stuff. And Lehman starts to go like he's getting really excited. Like, look at this. And we could do this here. And Wyler's going, yeah, I guess we could do that. So then, and Lehman's starting to get a real bad feeling about William Wyler.
Right.
And so he finishes the first draft of the script. He sends the first draft of the script off to William Wyler. Wyler calls him up and says, listen, I have never read such a perfect first draft of a script. I have 0 notes. How do you think this made Ernest Lehman feel?
I hope great.
No, opposite.
No.
Opposite. He went, we're fucked. Because there should never be a movie with no notes. Like nobody ever says there's no notes. And so he calls up Zanuck and says, listen, I think we're in trouble here. And then 2 things happen simultaneously.
Yeah.
One is that Wyler calls up Zanuck and says, hey, can we stall this movie a little bit? Because I have this other movie called The Collector that I want to make.
Ooh.
Can we just postpone?
Right.
And Ernst Lehman secretly sends the script to Robert Wise without telling Richard Zanuck. And actually, I should say there are 3 things going on because then there's a big storm or a hurricane or something that kills a lot of the sets and locations for Sand Pebbles. So Sand Pebbles gets delayed.
Okay.
So then Richard Zanuck, strangely enough, gets a call from Robert Wise's agent saying, Robert Wise might be interested in this. Zanuck calls up Lehman and says, you son of a bitch, you sent Robert Wise the script, didn't you? He's like, no, I would never have done that. And then what does Richard Zanuck do? He calls up William Wyler and says, you know what? I think we're going to part ways.
Yeah.
So Wyler goes off to make The Collector and Robert Wise comes on to direct. This is
fascinating. Let's take a moment here because the William Wyler situation is interesting. I don't know why Ernst Lehman thought William Wyler would be interested in a story like this. William Wyler's, let me tell you what the plot of The Collector is. A man kidnaps a woman and holds her hostage just for the pleasure of having her there. So, I mean, he leans towards the darker stuff. Even Ben-Hur has the darker edge to it when you see what happens to Masala and their relationship. But after this film comes out and is a hit, here are the 2 films he does afterwards. How to Steal a Million, which is a fun, more of a romping type of film, and then Funny Girl. So an interesting decision here that maybe affects William Wyler's point of views on doing a musical, a female-led musical, and a musical that might be a little sweeter than you think. Although Funny Girl, of course, is about, kind of aspiring to achieve this thing, Fanny Brice, based on a true story as well. But I wonder if him turning this down, seeing it become a massive success, changed his mind about his decisions about selecting certain films to go with and the tastes that the public was having at the time. And certainly doing Funny Girl 3 years later, I think is an indication of how he probably might have been influenced by turning down this movie. But I mean, I think he was giving all the signs to Ernst Lehman. He just wasn't paying attention to the red flags, So
I'm sure you've been in a situation where there's a gig that you're not really that into.
Yes.
But you don't necessarily have another gig.
Right. Right. So you explore it. Especially if they're going to take me to Salzburg for free.
Sure.
I absolutely would have gone. So, yeah.
So speaking of Salzburg, Lehman now takes Robert Wise, and it's completely different. Like everywhere they go, they're talking about what they could place here, how they would change it, how the scenery would change things. It's a really exciting creative partnership.
Yeah.
And what is the big thing that Robert Wise brings up? We cannot let this be as sweet and sentimental as the musical.
Hey.
So, and by the way, we're going to hear this a lot.
Yeah.
Lehman wants Julie Andrews from the beginning. Robert Wise, his number 1 choice is Grace Kelly.
Oh,
with the second being Shirley Jones.
Shirley would have been a great choice, right?
Great, yeah.
People forget because she was in the Partridge Family that Shirley Jones had a strong theatrical career. Elmer Gantry, Oklahoma, Shirley Jones can throw down, y'all. But people don't remember that because they get caught up in that TV show. Grace Kelly, I don't even know if she was a singer or not.
I don't either.
That would have been an interesting choice, but I understand the logic in both of those choices. But Julie Andrews, I mean, just is so perfect when you watch the movie.
She's astounding. Well, here's what happened is that Lehman and Wise got invited to watch a few scenes from a little movie that they were working on over at Disney called Mary Poppins. And so they watch, it hasn't been released yet. Nobody's seen it. And they watch 4 or 5 scenes, and Robert Wise turns to Lehman and says, we got to sign this girl before somebody else sees this film and grabs her.
That makes all the sense in the world when you watch Mary Poppins.
But Julie Andrews doesn't want to do the movie.
Ooh.
You want to know why?
Why, please?
Overly sweet and sentimental.
I got to be honest with you, okay? The reason I have resisted watching this movie is because the clips I've seen in my lifetime, I've always seen clips that are very sweet and sentimental.
And they are, yeah.
And all those kinds of things. And so I have resisted this movie for decades because of that particular thing, Steve. But I couldn't have been more wrong, which of course we'll get to down the road. But like, this film has a sweetness to it for sure. But as it progresses, you sense, because of the time frame, because of these little scenes, you sense the impending danger that is coming. And that helps you look at the film in a completely different light as you're watching it for the first time.
I think if you watch Favorite Things, Goat Herd, or Do Re Mi in isolation, which are the clips that they would frequently show, you go, well, this is a ridiculously sweet movie. And those are ridiculously sweet. They are. But if you see the whole movie in context, it doesn't feel that way.
Well, even the opening, the spinning around, the hills are alive. You're like, what is this? But like, when you watch the movie in context, you understand, Maria's a rebel. Maria, what she's doing in that opening is, in her mind, kind of rebellious.
Very rebellious, yeah.
I love that, yeah.
So, and in fact, what's interesting is in 1962, Julie Andrews and Carol Burnett had a special on TV where they did a whole send-up of The Sound of Music that they made fun of it ruthlessly. So she was like, no one's going to cast me in this. And they basically said, no, this is what we're working on. And she signs on.
Yeah. Well, come on. Carol Burnett made fun of all the movies. I mean, Gone with the Wind, number 1.
Yeah. By the way, I've heard multiple interviews with Carol Burnett recently, including one on Marc Maron and one on Fresh Air. She's the best.
Yes. 100%.
Just one of the great humans ever.
The thing, when people said, and I couldn't believe this was a real narrative recently in our pop culture zeitgeist, that women aren't funny. I absolutely lose it when people say that. My first person that I was exposed to in humor was Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
My first exposure to funny were women. And so to me, it's such a weird thing when people hold on to that stupid narrative that women aren't funny. Women are incredibly funny. And Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball are such great examples of that.
Absolutely. So they had a full 2 months of rehearsal for this film, which is a really long time. Part of it is because you're working with kids, and kids, you can only work them so many hours, and it's hard to get it. And it's also, they're rehearsing the music, they're recording the music because everything is pre-recorded before you're going to go film, and they have a lot of choreography to figure out. And what's crazy is the choreographers they're working with are Mark Barreau and Dee Dee Wood, which are the same choreographers that Julie Andrews worked with on Mary Poppins.
Oh, nice.
And they don't know that Julie Andrews got them the gig. Mm-hmm. But what's so interesting to me is that the difference in choreography from Mary Poppins, which is all fun and showy and very much choreography, to this, where it's all locations and moving through locations, it's a very different thing.
Yes.
But they worked really hard together, and the rehearsals, sounds like, were really valuable, and they were all there, including Christopher Plummer, throughout all of these, and it really helped them lock in, because some of the, as we get into the film, the way this was shot is actually really difficult, and it's a good thing they had all that rehearsal under their belt. Would you like to get in the movie?
Is it time? All right, let's do it. Bring it.
So what's so crazy is, in a lot of ways, this is the same as the opening of West Side Story, which is West Side Story opens with these sort of silent aerial photography of the city of Manhattan. And this opens with this kind of silent aerial photography of the Alps as you move in.
That's a great point. Yes.
And Robert Wise didn't want to do it. He's like, we already did this. And Lehman, but then it really sounds like Lehman liked the idea. And Robert Wise was like, I don't have anything better. The shots are gorgeous. I mean, the shots are absolutely stunning of that.
God, that's a great point. Like now, as I'm looking back, as the movie's fresh, I could just hear, you could lay the West Side Story opening. Yeah, the whistle and everything. You can lay it onto there if you wanted to, or use the whistle that Maria and the captain use in the opening introduction that they have. Mm-hmm. You could use the whistle there for that. So I love that idea. That's so interesting. Wow.
The Alps and the lakes and the small little towns and the snow-capped mountains and the beautiful clouds, which they one thing they didn't know, and we'll get into a lot, it rains a lot in Austria, in Salzburg. Yeah. It was a real problem. And so these clouds, although gorgeous throughout all this sequence, was messing up the production day after day after day after day.
I stayed in Vienna for 10 days in 1998 when I was studying there in England, and it rained twice while I was there for the 10 days. And it's a beautiful, beautiful country. And so to see it showcased, and when you juxtapose this to the West Side Story, it makes even more sense, Steve, because how many people really knew New York back in the 1960s? So this is an exposure to New York and the way it's presented. And by the same token, how many people know the hills of Austria at this time in the 1960s? So presenting an urban versus a natural approach here, I think, is fantastic in using that.
It's so interesting, too, because it points out, and this is maybe hopefully changing with Wicked, but back in the day, it was totally natural that you would spend your biggest budget movie on a musical.
Yes.
Right. Because those were it was before Jaws and Star Wars and then all the franchises and all that stuff that became the biggest movies. Back then, the big movies were Lawrence of Arabia and The Sound of Music and West Side Story, and those were the things you spent a lot of money on.
Yeah, and people complain nowadays, movies are too long. Now, look, you may have a case with some of the films for sure, but Hollywood has a history of doing epic, long movies that are successful and win multiple awards.
And then as the music is rising, we come to the iconic helicopter shot of Julie Andrews spinning as she bursts into song.
The hills are alive with the sound of music.
This obviously is a big helicopter shot, and you will notice, I will say as an editor, and I bet Robert Wise, the editor of Citizen Kane, would say they cut out slightly early of the helicopter shot into the static shot that they're going to cut to. And the reason is because this is a big ass helicopter. And so so first of all, if you have a whole hillside that's empty, that means all the crew, all the camera, everybody, including Robert Wise, is hiding 50 yards away in the trees somewhere. Because Julie Andrews has to be all alone. And then they're blasting over loudspeakers the sound of playback of the music so she can sing in sync to it. Because the helicopter, I don't know if you knew this, John, but helicopters are loud.
Yes, they are very loud.
They're really, really loud. And so people have bullhorns. Nobody can hear Julie Andrews. And the wind, the downdraft from the helicopter is so powerful that take after take after take, it's knocking Julie Andrews on her ass.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is scary.
Yeah.
And she's getting more and more pissed off, frankly, as this is happening. And she starts gesturing with her arms, like trying to say, like, can you have the helicopter be a little bit farther away from me so the downdraft isn't so strong? And they think that she's just waving okay. And they're like giving her thumbs up, like, you're doing great. Keep going. And this is like the 9th take.
Yeah.
And I think you could see in the way she is striding up that mountain, not being angry. She's not acting angry, but I think you could see it in her body.
There's a defiance in the movements. I agree. Yes, agreed.
And it's funny. This is probably my least favorite song in the whole movie, but it's like a 1-verse song of her singing about the beauty of the world. And by the way, you see her like step over this lovely brook that was built by for the movie and has like a plastic bottom. And at some point, one of the farmers whose land this is or something, he went up and he was so mad at everything, how they've been, because movie crews, they're driving trucks over all of his land. And so he comes up with his pitchfork and just punctures the fake brook, which drains out, and they had to rebuild because he was so mad. And there's another moment where she walks through these trees that are sort of white, like I think they're alder or something. Yeah. Those are totally just shipped in and planted briefly and then taken away. They're not part of the location either. And again, I'll say it many, many times, every shot is gorgeous. The sky is gorgeous. The green of the grass is gorgeous. And then we hear church bells, and she realizes she's late, has an oh crap moment, looks around and sees that she has thrown her nun's habit on the ground.
Yeah.
Which is, we already get a sense of who this person is. She grabs it and runs down the hill.
Yeah, she forgets it initially.
Yep.
Then you hear her grunt that she's forgotten it, as if it's a thing of like, she doesn't necessarily have it. How can I say this correctly? Like, a grunt implies something like frustration, as opposed to, which is an excitement of having forgotten it and like, oh, that's right. The grunt is more a matter of, that's right, I forgot this, And it also shows in a small way a character beat for her that she doesn't necessarily feel the sense that she should be doing this thing, even though she may not be honest with herself about it. But it's clear that her actions don't support that she's 100% happy being a nun. So it's a little foreshadowing of what's to come here in just a few minutes.
I think that's totally right. And I think one of the things, you learn things about characters through contrast.
Yeah.
So if you just show character being happy, you haven't learned that much. But if you show a character who is joyfully singing in nature and then goes, oh crap, I'm late, and has that grunt as you describe, we go, oh, I'm starting to get who this person is. By the way, this is the very last thing that Julie Andrews shot in Salzburg, because everybody else had left. Because when you're scheduling a movie, you don't want to put everybody up in hotels if you don't have to.
Right.
So if you wouldn't put a scene where you only have Julie Andrews while everyone else is there. You're like, well, get rid of all those people. So they wait till so even though it's the opening of the movie, this is the last thing they shot.
Yeah, and if you look at the song in context, I think it's also an important song to open the movie with, because yes, it seems cheesy initially if you're watching clips, as I said earlier. But if you understand the lyrics of what she's talking about, that this is a place she runs to for solace, for comfort, for happiness, for joy, for reconnecting with herself. And look, it's away from the Abbey. It's away from the other nuns. It's away from everyone else. So she is, although she's a kind and caring and generous spirit and empathetic spirit, she's also a spirit that finds strength in her lonely, in being alone and finding her peace. And I kind of like that,
And then we cut to titles over absolutely spectacular shots of Salzburg. And more and more after watching this, and you can go to Salzburg today and take the Sound of Music tour. It's really a remarkably looking city, Yeah. It seems to have survived World War II. I don't know how much was destroyed in Salzburg during World War II, but this looks pristine. And we see a title on screen that says Salzburg, Austria in the last golden days of the 30s. And we hear a choir coming from the Abbey, and we see nuns moving through this courtyard. So the exterior shots and the exterior courtyard are shot in the real Abbey. The Abbey would not allow filmmakers to come shoot inside the Abbey.
Makes sense.
So basically, most of the interior shots, one of the chapels is actually shot at a real chapel in Salzburg, but most of these interior shots are built on sets in Hollywood at 20th Century Fox. I am totally shocked by that. These things look so fucking good inside. I mean, I'm looking at there's things that I know set designers do great, but these that have like, medieval art and statues and engravings and all those things. And that's all these interiors are covered with that. They just look totally, totally amazing. The set designer, production designer is a guy named Boris Levin. He was born in Moscow. He did West Side Story. He did New York, New York. He did movies all the way into the 80s. He did Fletch. He did Color of Money. And another movie that you love is that he did Giant. He was the production designer for Giant.
Nice.
So this guy's the real deal. I mean, 40 years of experience in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And we see the nuns come in and kneel at the altar in a chapel. This is a real chapel shot in Salzburg, but almost all the other exteriors are not. Every single shot of the nuns are just beautifully framed. It's so painterly. You can see that like he wanted that Renaissance painting look. It's all very somber. It's all very serious. And after we finish the final Hallelujah, we meet the Reverend Mother, played by Peggy Wood, and she is a fantastic actress.
Reverend Mother.
Sister Bernice.
I simply cannot find her.
Maria?
She's missing from the Abbey again.
What a great energy to have to open the film after we've just had our time with Julie Andrews. She comes across, this is not a domineering woman. She's very, open to her other nuns and the conversation that happens. But this is also a great introduction to the rigidity of this life, right? Because we're about to, in a few scenes, she's going to become a baroness and walk into another Abbey, in essence, another rigidity of life with the captain. And so this is an interesting juxtaposition, except in that one, she has children that she's in charge of, and she's in essence can be an autonomous spirit. Here, she's much more part of the collective. She doesn't stand out as much, or she stands out for being rebellious, but it's frowned upon as opposed to what it ends up becoming for her when she becomes the governess for the Von Trapps.
So Peggy Wood has been around forever. Theater actor. She'd acted in silent films. She'd acted along. This is a established grande dame of the theater. And she's a well-known New York personality, including, man, she was part of the Algonquin Round Table, which is, if you don't know who that is, that's the intelligentsia of a certain era. People like Dorothy Parker and Harpo Marx and all sorts of people would meet and have these. I mean, it's one of the groups I would have loved to be a fly on the wall and listen to from this era, And so I love that we get such a sense of their feelings about this character, because it says,
I have looked everywhere, in all of the usual places.
Sister Bernice, considering that it's Maria, I suggest you look in some place unusual.
And they walk across this big courtyard. This courtyard is a set on the Fox lot. And we get into an argument about whether or not Maria belongs at the Abbey.
Well, Reverend Mother, I hope this new infraction ends whatever doubt you may still have about Maria's future here.
And I love all of the responses that the Reverend Mother has. She says,
I always try to keep faith in my doubts, Sister Bertha.
And then the other, which is Sister Margarita, is another nun, and she's like kind of Maria's supporter.
Yeah.
As they're arguing, we walk up in front of a bunch of younger nuns. And everything the Reverend Mother does is so wise and so ahead of everybody, because the younger nuns see that there's this little argument and conflict going between the other nuns.
Yeah.
And that Reverend Mother doesn't want them to think that there's an actual real conflict. So she says,
we were speculating about the qualifications of some of our postulants. The mistress of novices and the mistress of postulants were trying to help me by expressing opposite points of view.
So she is saying the reason they're not really fighting. They're fighting because I asked them to fight, which isn't true,
Yeah. Debate.
By the way, one of the things as they were developing the Broadway show is that Mary Martin was sending versions of the script to a very good friend of hers who was actually a Reverend Mother at an abbey in Illinois or something. And she sent these long letters back that went to Rodgers and Hammerstein, and they were basically like, please don't forget that we're real people. Like, we like to listen to the radio and we have jokes and personalities and we play games with each other and there's laughter. Because the way nuns tend to be portrayed up to this point was just like very formal, religious, no personality things,
Yeah. I imagine they didn't do that in the Blues Brothers. So
yeah, entirely different. Well, that's a scary nun, man.
That's true. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's the stereotype. Yeah.
And then we ask, what do you think of Maria? And we get these answers, and each answer is filled with contrast.
She's a wonderful girl, some of the time.
It's very easy to like Maria, except when it's difficult.
It's all the things we say about a character. I mean, yes, we've seen Maria, but we haven't really met her yet, you know?
Right.
And this is all great setup. And then we go into our next great song, which is How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria?
She climbs a tree and scrapes her knee. Her dress has got a tear. She waltzes on her way to mass and whistles on the stair. And underneath her whimper, she has curlers in her hair. I've even heard her singing in the Abbey.
Now, had you heard this song before? I assume you must have.
I had not heard the song before. And I loved it because, and there is, this is interesting. There is kind of a connective tissue with West Side Story as well, because, there's that section, have you met my girlfriend, Maria? With the I Feel Pretty, right? The juxtaposition of, that's two sides too, right? She's happy, she's joyful, whatever, but her coworkers are pointing out all the issues with Maria, that she's a dreamer, she's flighty, she doesn't show up on time. Like, there's all these things throughout that. So there's kind of an element, comparative element here with both of these songs showing the two sides of Maria, because clearly they all do love her.
Yeah.
But they are frustrated by the fact that she won't conform to them the way they want her to. Now, listen, this is the mid 1960s. So you look at all this idea of, it seems like a sweet story about a governess and all this. but this is also a rebellious governess, so which fits the time that rebellion is becoming a thing that's embraced in the 1960s in our country. So I think that's another reason why this film was as massively successful as it was. It wasn't just appealing to those who like family, quote, family entertainment. There was more going on below the surface with the lead, character.
There's something that came up when Scott and I were doing Enterprise Incidents, which is one of the thoughts that I had was like, oh, there's elements of Star Trek original series, which is the World War II generation, which is the people who are in charge, Gene Roddenberry, Gene Kuhn, the producers, many of the writers, they're World War II people.
Yeah.
And the boomers, which are the younger people, because there's this engagement between the military and order and sort of more freedom and hippie utopia and things like that. I think this movie's similar, which is I really think there is the strict, generation represented by the captain and the nuns and the order. And then there's this idea of play and fun and joy.
Yeah.
And what's important in life. And I think that dialogue is going on really strongly here. And that dialogue, that's all about what this song is. And that's what Maria is.
And remember, Steve, Robert Wise directs Star Trek The Motion Picture.
That's right.
Maybe there are connective tissues here that are coursing around this time, around these, next few years in his life,
I love the moment where Sister Margarita says,
I'd like to say a word in her behalf.
And say it, Sister Margareta.
Maria makes me laugh.
Yes, that's so good. And they all agree. They all laugh with her when she says that. Yeah.
And if you watch, this is why it's like in Mary Poppins, the choreography was Dick Van Dyke dancing with a penguin, or the chimney sweeps that are bouncing around and it's acrobatic and exciting. This scene, the choreography is nuns walking from here to there.
Yeah.
And so you don't go. I didn't even think about it as choreography really watching it, but then I heard Dee Dee Wood interviewed about it, and that it is because what they wanted to do. They need to move to the music, and then they need to move to these really painterly poses. They hit one after another. And so, and literally this is how they're doing. Because when you're doing choreography is that the choreographers have their dancers, and they're going to work everything out ahead of time before they teach it to the actors.
Right.
And so the dancers, including all the men, are wearing nuns' habits and nuns' outfits because they need to get the painting, the picture exactly right. And it didn't look exactly right unless they were wearing the black and white on their head.
Yeah.
And so that you see them moving to each of these positions, and each of these positions are remarkable,
Yeah, we should say Peggy Wood did not sing her stuff in the movie. She was dubbed by Marjorie McKay. So when you're hearing her sing at occasional points in the movie, it's not Peggy singing. And this is ironic because she was kind of known as a singing actress when she was coming up. So it's an interesting decision. I wonder if maybe her voice at that time wasn't as strong for what they wanted to do.
Yeah, particularly when we get to Climb Every Mountain, she just didn't have the pipes to pull that song off. And so that's why she's dubbed. But the voice they found for her is perfect.
Yeah.
Like I never would have known that it was somebody else.
How do you solve a problem like Maria? How do you catch a cloud and pin it down? How do you find a word that means Maria? A flibbity-gibbet, a will-o'-the-wisp, a clown.
Speaking of dubbing, one of the nuns is played by the great Marnie Nixon.
Yes.
And Marnie Nixon, of course, is the person who dubbed Maria in West Side Story, the person who dubbed the person who dubbed Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. I think she might have dubbed Deborah Kerr in The King and I as well. Like she is the world's most famous. I'm singing somebody else's voice. And on the set, people were scared when she met Julie Andrews.
Why?
Because they went, well, Audrey Hepburn, not a great singer. Part of the reason they're able to give her Julie Andrews' part that should have been hers in My Fair Lady is because of Marnie Nixon. And they went, is Julie Andrews going to resent having this person on her set that helped someone else steal a part that maybe she thought should have been hers?
Yeah.
Julie Andrews walks in and, of course, is classy as hell and walks up, shakes Marnie Nixon's hand, says, I'm a huge fan of yours. And they were good friends throughout.
She is gentle, she is wild. She's a riddle, she's a child. She's a headache, she's an angel. She's a girl.
And then the song, as they finish in these perfect poses, the song is just cut off by this loud bang. as Maria Julie Andrews runs in, doesn't see them, goes straight to the water pump, throws her habit on the ground, starts to wash her face, gets up, and is walking by the nuns. This moment, I'd seen many times. I still laugh out loud. I think it is so funny, which is there's this moment that she notices them.
Yeah.
And she looks over and you expect her to go, "Oh, Reverend Mother, I'm so sorry I was late," and make some apologies. But instead, she just like shakes her head with an expression of, "Well, I guess I'm screwed," and just walks off.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Which fits what we're going to see later, what she tries to teach the kids, right? Find the joy even in the mistakes. Find the joy even in the errors or what have you. That's definitely her life philosophy. And this is a quick little foreshadowing for that, you know?
Yep, absolutely. So they finish the song. It's later on, and now we see Maria in her full postulate's garb with the habit, going to see the Reverend Mother, comes in, kisses her hand. Again, this office is a set. It was a cover set. So it was built actually in Hollywood, shipped to Salzburg, because they knew there was going to be rain. And so when you have rain, you go like, well, I can always go shoot the Reverend Mother set because they literally will carry it with them to every location. So they can just build it up and go shoot there. And that's what they did.
Oh, Reverend Mother, I'm so sorry. I just couldn't help myself. The gates were open and the hills were beckoning. And before
I haven't summoned you here for apologies.
Oh, please, Mother, do let me ask for forgiveness.
It'll make you feel better.
Which I love. Like, this is all these little pieces where you see the wisdom of this woman.
Yeah, that's a great word, Steve. Absolutely. Wisdom permeates throughout this scene from her side.
And she describes just how when she sees nature, she just gets pulled by it and doesn't really realize what's happening. It's funny thinking about it now because, having with my kid, it's like, oh, Maria's describing ADHD. She's got distracted and follows that thing. That's what people with ADHD do.
Child, suppose darkness had come and you were lost.
Oh, Mother, I could never be lost up there. That's my mountain. I was brought up on it. It was the mountain that led me to you.
And it is true that Maria von Trapp lost both of her parents. She was actually raised by like an abusive uncle, like physically abusive, like really, really bad and scary.
Wow.
And then eventually found her way to the Abbey.
And what's worse, I can't seem to stop saying things. Everything and anything I think and feel.
Some people would call that honesty.
Oh, but it's terrible, Reverend Mother.
So first of all, again, every line is advancing this character,
Yep.
And I love this moment. She says,
"You know how Sister Berta always makes me kiss the floor after we've had a disagreement?"
And you can totally see from the Reverend Mother's face that she did not know that.
Yeah.
She doesn't like it.
Yeah.
She thinks it's messed up, but she doesn't say anything. And she says,
"Well, lately I've taken to kissing the floor when I see her coming, just to save time."
What's funny, she's not angry about doing that.
No. Well, because she's like, young. This is what's expected. And she knows clearly they've made her feel rather that she's not up to snuff. So she does these things and doesn't think of negatively about them because that's what she probably feels like she deserves, so to speak,
Well, and she wants to succeed.
Yes, right. Yes, that as well. Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And they talk about whether or not she fits in here and what lessons she's learned here. And she asks,
"And what is the most important lesson you have learned here, my child?"
To find out what is the will of God and to do it wholeheartedly.
It's thematically central to a lot of what happens in this movie.
Yes. And I think it's great direction when you're looking at a scene like this that can be stagnant because you're going back and forth. For her to get up when she says that implies that Maria has provided the avenue that I think the Reverend Mother was looking for. This is, let me use what you just laid out to me as the logic for this next thing that I'm going to tell you.
There is a family near Salzburg that needs a governess until September.
Until September?
To take care of 7 children.
7 children?
Do you like children, Maria?
Well, yes, but I'm 7.
By the way, first of all, Maria was not hired to take care of 7 children. There was a different number of children. I think at this point there were 8. Later on, there were 10 in total.
Wow.
Maria was actually hired because Georg's wife, the whole family had come down with scarlet fever.
Oof.
Georg's wife had died.
Yeah.
One of the daughters, whose name was also Maria, was still recovering from scarlet fever. So she was actually hired to be a tutor for one daughter. And this was not in the late 30s in the golden age at the end of the 30s. This was in 1926.
Oh,
this is many, many years earlier that she was hired to go to the Von Trapps.
Yeah, and I love this scene now with it fresh in my mind because of what it symbolizes for me, right? She is, in essence, the Reverend Mother's, in essence, a symbol of an institution, right?
Yes.
And again, it's the mid-1960s. You have a rebellious lead character here who is not adhering to the rules, but she is not trying to take out her anger, the Reverend Mother, at her for it. She is understanding of her young rebellious nun because of what she feels for her and because of the care she has for her. And she understands what it's like to be young. And that's the thing sometimes we forget. I'm guilty of it too sometimes. You forget what it's like to be young. You forget what it's like to be full of piss and vinegar. You forget what it's like when everything is new and interesting and exciting and your hormones and your emotions are all over the place. That's the game, and you're learning. And I think what happens is sometimes the older members of the institution or older members of our society forget that about young people. And this Reverend Mother is so understanding and accepting while also being clear. When Maria tries to protest too much, she finally just goes, Maria. And that calms her down. And she understands I must accept what she wants me to do. And so there's a care and a strength being shown here that you don't always see from authoritarian characters in authority in films. And so I like that that's an element here in their relationship because of what it's going to lead to later. And so this is a way that gets Maria to accept it. And I think another thing is true is that rebels need to have something to rebel against. When you remove them from the situation they want to rebel against, they can be quite afraid of being removed from that situation because they have found their place in that situation, being able to rebel against it. Once you remove it, they get very unsettled. So that's the thing you have to understand about a rebel sometimes.
I think those are great points. And it takes me back to how do you solve a problem like Maria? You know what's really interesting about Reverend Mother, and I love the line where she says, I'm having them argue for me to look at different sides of this.
Right. Yeah.
That's what she does through the whole thing, is that she listens to all the contradictory personality traits of Maria.
Yes.
To which her response is she's a girl. Because none of those, she has the most sympathy for Maria's age and where she is in her development. Yeah. And then she takes all of that in. Yeah. And then she actually makes the decision that Maria needs to leave the Abbey, that's what's right for this particular girl at this particular time in her life. And but she doesn't say any of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a truly wise character.
Yeah.
Maria is outside the Abbey. She's dressed in that outfit with the hat and the bag and her guitar, and she's walking out, and she's very much in the shadows. Like, it's very, very dark, and we don't see her well. And she's moving forward nervously.
What will this day be like? I wonder.
And this is one of 2 new songs that were written for the movie.
Oh.
Because Robert Wise and Lehman felt like they needed a transition. It can't just go right from the Reverend Mother's office to the villa. Like, we had to build up, because we're not showing just how scared and how scary this situation is and what Maria has to do.
Yeah.
So they go to Richard Rodgers and say, we want a new song. Oscar Hammerstein had passed away in 1960, so he's not there to help.
Okay.
Rodgers is a good lyricist himself. He writes this song. And it goes to Saul Chapman, who's I think the music supervisor and who did the arrangements, and to Ernest Lehman, and they were not happy with it. And so they rewrote the lyrics. They gave it to Marnie Nixon to record a demo. They sent the demo back to Richard Rodgers, who sounds like he said, look, I don't really like it, but, whatever. Do whatever you guys want to do. And so that's how we get to this song.
It could be so exciting to be out in the world, to be free. My heart should be wildly rejoicing. Oh, what's the matter with me?
I love this song.
I think the song's great. I agree. Yeah.
This, to me, I was sitting there as I was going, okay, John's going to see this movie for the first time. And I went, when he gets to confidence, he's either going to be sold or he's not. And to me, Julie Andrews' performance in this song, the amount of charisma and energy and power that comes off of her is astounding for me.
Yes. And she, songs, people talk about musicals, right? How is it advancing the story, advancing the plot? Sometimes it is not about advancing the story of the plot. Sometimes it's about giving you character development, character work. It's essentially a scene that is being put in here, and that's what you're seeing, right? What she does, because she is showing you physically her hesitation, but her desire to confront her hesitation, her desire to be better. And so you see her doing that in the physical moments. You see her rebellious nature when she splashes the water at the dolphin statue, whatever that is. That's
it's a horse.
there.
It's a horse. It's an amazing looking statue to me. Yeah.
Beautiful sculpture there.
Yeah.
And so you see that she has her moments of defiance, but she's also, for us as the audience, we also know that she's nervous about it. She's scared about it. She's not sure she can do it. So how many of us have been at that stage in our lives when we were younger where an opportunity presents itself and we are nervous and scared about taking it on, but we're willing, but we still do it anyway, right? There's a strength in confronting it anyway. And that makes me like her as a character even more, to have this song here. And as you said, Steve, Julie Andrews delivering it is what really sells the song, more so than the lyrics or the music. It's Julie Andrews' performance as well.
I've always longed for adventure, to do the things I've never dared. Now here I'm facing adventure, then why am I so scared?
I think this absolutely advances the story because it goes, this is someone psyching themselves up.
Yes, basically.
They're scared as hell.
Yeah.
And they go, I cannot show fear in this situation. I've got to be. And so I'm going to spend this whole journey from the gates of the Abbey to the gates of the villa, getting myself pumped to be ready to do this gig.
Yeah.
Oh, I must stop these doubts, all these worries. If I don't, I just know I'll turn back. I must dream of the things I am seeking. I am seeking the courage I lack.
A couple of things. First of all, again, you can see the location scout with Ernst Lehman and Robert Wise walking around because every shot is an interesting shot of Salzburg. You mentioned the one with the fountain with the horse. I think it's stunning. Yes. There's one where she's walking. She comes out walking through these arches. And if you look as she walks through the arches, way in the background, you can see some women dressed in traditional Austrian garb who are walking across in the background for maybe 4 seconds. Mm-hmm. And that is Maria von Trapp, the real Maria von Trapp, and her granddaughter way in the background.
Wow.
So apparently Maria von Trapp, bit of a she's a control freak. And she ran the family and the performances. And then she sells her thing. You know, she sold her story to the German film company, which ended up eventually with, you know, the musical and with Fox. Is that she really didn't understand that she had sold away all rights to control the way her story was told.
Oh.
So even when she showed up to the set, she was telling Robert Wise what he was doing wrong and where he should put stuff. And they're like, and Robert Wise is like, lovely lady, we need to get rid of her. You know, so, but they did shoot her. She is in this scene. As we said, every shot is beautiful. Well, the guy making all of these beautiful shots is Ted McCord, classic Hollywood cinematographer. He did Treasure of Sierra Madre. He did East of Eden. I mean, this is, you know, we're filming on 70 millimeter. This is really beautiful, beautiful stuff.
With each step I am more certain everything will turn out fine. I have confidence the world can all be mine. They'll have to agree I have confidence in me.
And then she starts walking down this lane, carrying her stuff with increasing energy and striding and spinning and jumping and clicking her heels. You could feel so much energy coming off of Julie Andrews in this.
I have confidence in sunshine. I have confidence in rain. I have confidence that spring will come again. Besides which you see, I have confidence in me.
And this is part of why she played it this way. Is that she said, basically, I almost never have trouble remembering lyrics. And she goes, lyrics are extremely important. That's the dialogue of the show. And she just always has a good memory for lyrics, except these lyrics. She was really struggling to remember the lyrics. And I'm going like, I wonder if Oscar Hammerstein hadn't died, or if Richard Rodgers, if they were the Richard Rodgers lyrics, if she'd have an easier time remembering them. But some of them, she's like going, what is, you know, strength having to do with good night's sleep and all these lines? They just didn't make a lot of sense to her.
Yeah.
And so what she decided was, if I'm going, the only way for me to, if I try to think about the lyrics, I will forget the lyrics. So I have to not think about the lyrics. And therefore, the only way to do that is to be physically so over the top that I cannot think about the lyrics because I'm thinking about spinning and jumping and clicking my heels and all that stuff.
Right.
And that is why she performs it this way.
Oh, how interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It would never have occurred to me, because I love this performance. I just find it astounding.
Different actors are going to react to things differently, and whatever works for them works for them. Yeah, because most actors would be like, "No, I've got to understand the song, and then the lyrics will be easy for me to remember." No, she's doing something more of a physical kind of connotation to the lyrics. Yeah.
All I trust, I leave my heart to. All I trust becomes my own. I have confidence in confidence alone.
And right as she makes her peak, she has arrived at the estate, and she looks through the bars at this palatial villa.
Yeah.
And you see all that confidence kind of drain out of her for a moment. By the way, this house, this is not the Von Trapp's family's house. This is the home of famous Austrian director Max Reinhardt.
Oh.
And this is currently the, Mozart was born in Salzburg.
Yes.
And this is the Mozart Symposium. That's what this house is now.
Oh, nice.
That they used to shoot.
I got to go back, man. I love that country. I got to go back.
It's really beautiful.
Especially the Mozart. I got to go to Salzburg to see the Mozart stuff for sure.
You could see her steel herself and get up her courage, and she opens up that gate and goes back into the song and marches off. And I think her stumble as she is marching is one of the best actor stumbles I've seen. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
To fake tripping and make it look real and not hurt yourself.
And this is so smart, Steve, because this allows the audience to immediately connect with her, right? Because it makes her vulnerable, but interesting because she's confronting her fears and she's stumbling or whatever. But that makes us care about her even more because even though she stumbles, even though she falls, she still keeps going. And there's something about us as human beings that respects and loves that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And she walks up to the door, and it is opened by Gil Stewart, who plays Franz, the butler.
I'm from the convent. I'm the new governess, Captain.
And I'm the old butler, Fräulein.
Just that one line and his disdain and coldness is setting up him as a character that we're going to come back to much later in the movie.
Yeah.
Because this is the guy that's going to turn him into the Nazis, or one of the people who's going to turn him into the Nazis.
Yeah.
And immediately just from this moment, you get that this is not a good guy.
Yeah.
By the way, so the interiors of this estate are shot in Hollywood on sound stages. The exterior is in Salzburg.
Mm.
So we're in an over-the-shoulder shot. So we're shooting over Franz's shoulder to look at Maria, and we're shooting over Maria's shoulder to look at Franz.
Yeah.
The shot from over Franz's shoulder looking at Maria is in Salzburg because that's the exterior. The shot over Maria's shoulder looking at Franz is in Hollywood on a set and the reason is because Franz has that door open a little bit and the interior of the actual house in Salzburg doesn't match this interior.
Mm.
And this is, so the only way to have that door open is to shoot that side in Hollywood.
Right.
But here's the thing. There are a million ways they could have shot that OTS that wouldn't have, if they'd had been on the other side or changed the angle slightly, you don't have to see any of the interior of the house.
Right.
But Robert Wise felt that it was important to see the interior of the house. And so he made the shooting way more complicated.
Oh, interesting.
And we hear this a lot. There are a lot of shots where half of it in Salzburg, half in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Or we're going to see another one where half at one estate and half at another state. And these are all just, they look seamless to us, but they're really complicated for the actors and complicated for the crew because you're shooting them months apart.
Yeah.
So the actual Von Trapps did have money. They did have a villa. They did not quite have a villa at this level. This is a little, they had a very, very nice lifestyle.
Yeah.
But it wasn't their ancestral home. They had only just moved there in 1922.
Oh, okay.
It was after World War I, and as I said, Georg was a hero in World War I. He had, I think, was named a baronet. But then at the end of the war, because of the peace treaty, Austria no longer had a navy because they changed all the borders of Austria, so they didn't really have shoreline anymore. And so Georg didn't have a gig. He had nothing to do. And gentlemen at that time, it was beneath them to have a job. So Georg was doing nothing in the 20s.
Oh, must be nice.
Well, the aristocracy, they did not work, John.
Yeah.
That was, work is for the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, not for the aristocracy. And then his wife died in like 2024, and then Maria shows up, or 25, and Maria shows up in 1926. So they'd only lived in this house for like 3 or 4 years when Maria shows up. and she's standing there alone, and then she looks at this other door and opens it and walks into this absolutely ornately designed ballroom with paintings on the walls and wood inlay and parquet floors. And again, I'm stunned that this was a set.
Yeah.
Like, to me, these don't seem like easy things to build in a Hollywood set,
Yeah.
you know?
It's beautifully done.
And she does it's funny. I just rewatched Lawrence of Arabia recently, where he does the pantomime of bowing when he's right before Anthony Quinn spots him, you know, and he's freshly in the new outfit.
When he's playing with his robes, right? His
exactly.
Robes, yes.
This is a similar moment. She's all alone in the ballroom, and now she plays being asked to dance, and she curtsies. And then as she's accepting the dance, we hear a door open. Here's my description here in my notes. As I wrote, and there is Christopher Plummer looking like a fucking stud standing in that doorway. He looks so good.
Yeah. It's a great presentation of how they frame him, because he is strong, powerful, half in the light, half in the dark. He opens both of the doors, so it's a grandiose presentation, but he's very still.
Yeah.
You know, and so she has to move to him and is, just kind of runs to, in essence, that's her reaction to authority, is to kind of run and be a little slightly subservient in the reaction, but then eventually find her footing, you know? And so I like that shows you the two characters, and it's a great character introduction for him. This is what we're going to get from him initially for a while in the film.
And I think the way his clothes are tailored, he has just that great shape to his body, you know, that looks masculine and imposing and beautiful. Like, it's just, I think he's a beautiful man too. Here are some of the other people considered for this role.
Please.
Bing Crosby.
Terrible.
Yul Brynner.
Oh, I could see that.
You'll totally work. Richard Burton. He'd be good. He'd totally do it. Here's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Sean Connery.
Sean. I mean, listen, I know we know Plummer as the old guy now, but like when you see him in this movie, he is beautiful, as you said. And so if Sean Connery was in consideration, if you see a young Sean Connery, you know how beautiful he was as a young man as well. So it makes sense to bring him into this thing.
Well, and they both have what I would call an intense masculinity.
Yes.
At this time, you know, and I think that's critical to this role.
And listen,
you know,
if you do any research on Plummer, you know, he didn't have the greatest reputation himself, for God's sakes. You know, a lot of arrogance, a lot of cockiness.
I got some stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Robert Wise didn't want any of them. He had seen Christopher Plummer in a whole bunch of theater. Christopher Plummer is not well known at this point. Mm-hmm. And he was like, this is who I want. Christopher Plummer absolutely refused to do this movie. Not only did he say that essentially, you know, the part was really small. Yeah. Like in the play, it was like the captain comes out, is a jerk for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then Mary Martin has 3 big, huge numbers, and then the captain comes out and is a jerk for like another few minutes, and then Mary Martin has more numbers. So first of all, he didn't like that, and second of all, he thought that the play was strictly sweet and sentimental and didn't want to be involved with it. Yeah. And Rob Wise flies to London and talks through it, and he says, look, okay, I will do it, but you have to let me talk to Ernest Lehman. And so over and over again, he is meeting with Ernest Lehman and pressuring him and going, can you make this character interesting? Can you give him some strength? Can you give him some nuance, some humor, some levels, some layers, something? And so that was a lot of Christopher Plummer pushing and pushing and pushing to make his character a real character.
Yeah. I mean, and he spent years not being very positive about the movie. Even after all of that, he spent many, many years. It wasn't until his autobiography that he softened his stance on the film, and you could couple that probably with older age and and a desire not to keep harping on the situation because people love this movie. And I think an element of it also was that Christopher Plummer was probably frustrated as an actor that he didn't blow up till much, much later in life. You know, it's not that he wasn't part of some really incredible films, just like The Sound of Music, but people were talking about Julie Andrews coming out of the movie. They weren't talking about Christopher Plummer. And so it's this thing that you look at. And so there's a bitterness that's attached to a lot of that because you're frustrated that you haven't achieved it. I hate to break it to you, but creatives and actors especially are quite egotistical. Richard Burton had the same issue, you know, ironically also considered for the part. He didn't get over as strongly when he was younger as he does when he's older before he unfortunately passes at such an early age. And so you have that element to it. So I think the fact that he did find success eventually, was someone who people cared about in the end and wanted to see more from him until before he passed, I think allowed him to soften his stance about the film overall, and also another Star Trek actor. So
another Star Trek actor.
Yeah.
It sounds like, reading between the lines of listening to a lot of behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
That he was a lot on the set.
A lot of people have said quite a prick. Yes.
And that the number of times the subject of drinking comes up around Christopher Plummer, it was like, and I went to the bar and had some drinks. It was really cold, so we had a lot of drinks. It was, like there's a lot of drinking. And it also, like, Julie Andrews, who seems like she's still good buddies with him, like, says basically people were in awe of him. Like, he was an incredibly intimidating Shakespearean actor who walked into every room, took over every room with this incredible power and dignity. And you got all these kids and Julie Andrews who were scared shitless of him,
Yeah.
But that
he probably enjoyed,
Wait, he did.
Yeah.
Wait till I'll get to some other stuff of him. He says,
"Why do you stare at me that way?"
Well, you don't look at all like a sea captain, sir.
Yeah, it's good. It's good because then he says, you don't look like a governess. So it's both of them staking a bit of a claim to their position, to their space. She may come across as overly subservient or overly frazzled by him, but she's not going to be bullied by him. And so her making that comment in a way takes him down a little bit, and he has to retort because he's not as strong as he exudes initially, because people who are strong don't need to retort. They know who they are, but he felt that need to retort to put her in her place because he's essentially been bullying the children to be in a certain place to deal with his grief,
Yeah, I think he is a person who is like in so much pain that his only way of dealing with pain is to create the illusion of control over everybody that's around him.
100%.
Even though that's not actually working for him.
Right. Which is what ironically makes him a sympathetic character as the film goes along. Yeah.
And he asks her to turn around and doesn't like the dress she has on.
It's the dress. You'll have to put on another one before you meet the children.
But I don't have another one.
And I love the little jokes in this movie are really good.
When we enter the Abbey, our worldly clothes are given to the poor.
And what about this one?
Well, the poor didn't want this one.
That's a really good joke.
And we hear,
what dress is better when you turn around? I'm confused about the turning of the making her turn around. Like,
I think it's pure dominance. That's what I think. It's just, he is like, you didn't behave like my servant and inferior.
Yes.
Because it's not just boss and servant. It's also aristocracy and peasant.
Oh, good point. Yes.
Yes. And he's a captain in the military who is used to being obeyed. Yeah. So everything for him is about status and how people are supposed to behave around other people's status. And she's not doing it right.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's got the most misbehaved children on the planet. But yeah.
Now, Fräulein
Maria.
Fräulein Maria, I don't know how much the Mother Abbess has told you.
Not much.
You are the 12th in a long line of governesses who have come to look after my children since their mother died.
What's interesting to me, and I really hadn't thought about it, is in Mary Poppins, which we did like a year ago, there have been multiple nannies who the children have tortured and have all been rejected, and that she is brought in to be the governess of the unmanageable children. It's literally the identical setup. And in both movies, the real problem is the father.
Yeah, good point. Yes.
And yet they're totally different movies. And I actually think, I was thinking about it watching this time, strangely enough, I think The Sound of Music is really 3 stories.
Yeah.
Of which story 1 parallels Mary Poppins very closely, which is the relationship between the father and the children and the problems with the children.
Right.
But then we move into these other movies, which are a love triangle, and then this political movie with Nazis that are totally, totally other things. Which is very interesting structurally.
I trust that you will be an improvement on the last one. She stayed only 2 hours.
What's wrong with the children, sir?
There's a great look from him.
It's also a window into her, right? Because as she told Reverend Mother, I just say what I feel all the time.
Yeah.
And this is another moment where she does that, right? Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with the children. Only the governesses. They were completely unable to maintain discipline. Without it, this house cannot be properly run. You will please remember that, Fräulein?
Yes, sir.
So we get a perfect sense of where he's standing.
Every morning you will drill the children in their studies. I will not permit them to dream away their summer holidays. Each afternoon they will march about the grounds, breathing deeply.
Sounds like a great time.
Yeah, a blast.
Yeah.
Totally.
And she says, "Excuse me, sir, when do they play?" And he just completely ignores that line, goes over more of her rules, and then says, "I'm placing you in command." And she, again, this is just what you said.
Yeah.
She cannot control herself. And she salutes and says,
"Yes, sir."
And he's not pleased with that at all.
No.
And then he pulls out his bosun's whistle from, obviously, his U-boat.
Yes.
So the actual Von Trapps say there are all sorts of inaccuracies in the movie, which there are.
I'm sure.
But the whistle is not one of them.
Oh, wow.
He had a whistle, except it was just because they did have a large estate, and that was a good way to have someone hear you when they were across the estate. Right. There was no marching. There was no discipline. There was none of that stuff. They didn't have, it was not for discipline. It was just a way of communicating over distances.
Right.
And then there's a great build because you hear these thundering footsteps.
Mm-hmm.
And she's starting to look a little bit scared. And then the kids come slamming out of the doors, assembling on the balcony above. And I love the moment that she counts and realizes, I only see 6 kids.
Yeah.
All sorts of little details like that are very fun. So casting these kids took months.
Wow.
Of seeing hundreds and hundreds of kids, both in New York and Los Angeles, and I think in London as well.
Yeah.
Here are some names of kids that did not get cast.
Ooh.
Mia Farrow auditioned. Wow. Patty Duke. Leslie Ann Warren. Geraldine Chaplin. Terry Garr. Wow. Kurt Russell. And then the article just said, the Osmonds. So I don't know if it's all of the Osmonds. It might have been. It might have been all of the Osmonds.
Yeah.
And they all turn in sync and start marching down the stairs. And then I love that Brigitte, the last girl, just kind of walks in and takes her place. Reading a book is a nice little bit of character.
Yes.
So Christopher Plummer inspects the troops. Here's a quote from Christopher Plummer. "I loathe children so much. I'm rather like W.C. Fields, who said, I like children if they are properly cooked." And then he said, "I always think they're a noted nuisance because just when you're ready to carry on doing a scene, you have to stop so they can go to school. Some union rule that you can't work these little monsters past 5 minutes at a time. So I thoroughly enjoyed being a complete Nazi martinet, blowing this whistle and herding them like cattle."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he said, "Of course, I got terribly fond of this group of kids, and they were terrific actors and very professional. They still had to go to school, damn their eyes." He's a lot.
Not a Reverend Mother.
No.
As I sound your signals, you will step forward and give your name. You, Fräulein, will listen carefully. Learn their signals so that you can call them when you want them.
Liesl.
So this is Charmaine Carr.
Mm-hmm.
Who that's not her original name. I think she changed it for the show, but I remember her original name.
Mm-hmm.
She's actually 21.
Yeah, duh. I mean, when she stepped forward, I'm like, this is a girl in her 20s. What the hell is this?
Yeah.
And then later when she says she's 16, I'm like, but yeah,
The next oldest kid is 13.
Mm-hmm.
Julie Andrews is 28. So she couldn't really relate to the kids, but she's also just at the bottom age to be relating to the grown-ups. So she was in a kind of weird spot. She was a model.
Yeah.
No desire to be an actress. No desire to be a singer or a dancer. She's working part-time in a doctor's office when some friend of hers just snuck a picture of hers into Robert Wise's office.
Oh, wow.
Wise saw it and called her in. And she's like, "But I'm not an actor." And she went in, took the meeting anyway, and got the part.
Wow.
The next one is Friedrich, who's played by Nicholas Hammond. And Friedrich was a little too short when he started working on this movie.
Oh.
And so he had very, very big lifts in his shoes. The movie shot almost 6 months. He grew 6 inches in the course of the movie. And so it went from the big lifts to the little lifts to no lifts to now they're putting lifts in the other kids' shoes because he's taller than them. And now they're putting all the other kids on apple boxes because Friedrich grew so much in the course of the shoot.
And we do know Nicholas Hammond goes on to become Spider-Man in the 1970s. Right. It's that Nicholas Hammond who you see there playing her brother in this particular section of the movie.
We've got Kurt, played by Dwayne Chase. Brigitte, played by Angela Cartwright. She was the daughter on Make Room for Daddy. So she's a well-known TV star.
Right.
Marta is Debbie Turner. There's just that little bit of hesitation as she comes up. And then Gretel, who is Kim Carath. Again, Christopher Plummer said, I had no interest in this children, except Kim Karath grew up to be a babe. So then I was interested in her.
Oh, my God. Whoa.
Just saying what he said.
And by the way, Angela Cartwright is the younger sister of Veronica Cartwright. And so you know Veronica Cartwright from, who by the way, you know her from Alien. She's the one that freaks out when the thing comes out, and numerous other films and shows. I recently finished the new series that's on Netflix with Ted Danson, A Man on the Inside. Veronica Cartwright is one of the many actresses and actors from the older times that they bring in to be a part of this of that series. And I highly, highly recommend that series, especially if you've been down or feeling kind of depressed about the world. That series put a big old smile on my face and Lady Outlaw's face. And it was great seeing all these actors I've known for years pop up. Sally Struthers, Margaret Avery, who played Shrug in The Color Purple. So there's a lot of Shrug in The Color Purple. So there's a lot of great actors that are part of it, including The Fly, the villain in The Fly, who of course we had a conversation about. He is the main antagonist to Ted Danson in the series. So it's a lot of fun. Highly recommend that series.
Very cool. And that's the Good Place guy, right? That's the Parks and Rec.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's awesome.
Now, when I want you, this is what you will hear.
Oh, no, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I could never answer to a whistle. Whistles are for dogs and cats and other animals, but not for children, and definitely not for me. It would be too humiliating.
Fräulein, were you this much trouble at the Abbey?
Oh, much more, sir.
I think the psych up of the song Confidence worked. Because she doesn't back down in all sorts of ways that you would think that she would.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Agreed.
And he starts to walk away.
Yes, this is the moment.
And she whistles to his backside. And all the kids are watching, shocked. And he turns around slowly and she says,
Excuse me, sir, I don't know your signal.
I love this moment of defiance. Again, this moment, she is very much her own person. And you may get caught up in thinking that she's this kind of mousy or not that pushy, but like in the moments when she needs to, she finds a different way of defiance. And I love to see her defiance in the movie because she's essentially, without saying it, she's essentially saying, how would you like it if you were called by whistles to come and stand? Wouldn't be cool, would it? You know?
And she has that little smirk on her face.
Yes.
There's just that little like, a kind of not above it, but just like I'm not intimidated by this wealthy, powerful military. Like she's seeing through him a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I think too, and this is, I don't mean any disrespect towards Mary Poppins at all. I love Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins is a great movie.
Yes.
The character of Mary Poppins is not nearly the hero that Maria is.
Yes.
Because Mary Poppins has it all together.
Yeah.
Mary Poppins, she knows past, present, future, everything that's happening. She has magic powers. She is never put off by, she never has to deal with anything that intimidates her.
Right.
Nothing intimidates Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Maria is an orphan who was at the Abbey, who goes into a house of wealth and privilege with nobody she knows, no power whatsoever, and she is not intimidated.
Right.
Or she probably is. I should say it differently. It's not that she's not intimidated. It's that she steps up. She goes, I know what's right. I am not going to, I have confidence. And she's going to keep going that even when she's scared and uncomfortable, doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that moment too of whistling at Dad, man, the kids notice.
Yeah.
And that is the first sort of like, oh, this one might be different.
Yeah.
I like too that after she's gone, they're all sitting at attention and she says at ease and they go at ease. And she has a like, oh, I didn't expect that to work.
Well, now that there's just us, would you please tell me all your names again and how old you are?
I'm Liesl. I'm 16 years old and I don't need a governess.
And I love it's like the wisdom of the Reverend Mother, like his warn, because she says,
glad you told me, Liesl. We'll just be good friends.
Like she has a way of not resisting, but standing her ground completely confidently in this moment.
I'm Brigitte.
You didn't tell me how old you are, Louisa.
Because she remembered the name and knows that she's lying.
Yeah.
And then Brigitte steps forward and she says,
I'm Brigitte. She's Louisa. She's 13 years old and you're smart.
So right there, the fact that she said she's smart, we see it's like the little pieces of ice melting, that they're going, oh, this one's different.
And I think your dress is the ugliest one I ever saw. Brigitte, you shouldn't say that.
Which we think Kurt is saying, don't be rude to this guest. That is a rude thing to say.
Why not? Don't you think it's ugly? Of course. But Fräulein Hilda's was ugliest.
Then Marta steps forward and says,
I'm Marta, and I'm going to be 7 on Tuesday. And I'd like a pink parasol.
Well, pink's my favorite color, too.
You know what it is? It's yes and.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
She's not contradicting. She's not pushing back. She's just taking in what they're saying and going further with it.
And this is an easy way to establish each of them individually without having to do exposition scenes to establish them. You've got now their personalities and their ideas, and they're about to encircle her. So it's ironic because the captain apparently supposedly thinks he's running a tight ship, but all of these kids are clearly not as disciplined as he seems to think they are, or has deluded himself to think they are, because they are quite impertinent, shall I say.
Well, and what's interesting that we hear later is the reason that they're impertinent is because that's the only way they can get any attention from him at all.
Right.
They're
acting out. Yes.
Yeah.
Now I have to tell you a secret. I've never been a governess before.
You mean you don't know anything about being a governess?
Nothing. I'll need lots of advice.
And all of the mischievous looks that go around the group's like, oh, we got a fresh one. And then they give her all the worst advice you could possibly imagine.
Never eat your soup quietly. And during dessert, always blow your nose.
Don't you believe a word they say, Fräulein Maria.
Oh, why not?
Because I like you.
And then in comes Frau Smith, who's played by Norma Varden, who had worked with Robert Wise multiple times as a director. And she's got a great dignity about her.
Yes.
Fräulein Maria, I'm Frau Smith, the housekeeper.
How do you do?
How do you do? I'll show you to your room. Follow me.
Poor little dears.
But then has a very strong reaction to something and pulls a frog out of her pocket that hops away.
Yeah.
Julie Andrews, when she read the script, was terrified that she would actually have to touch a real frog. Fortunately for her, it was just a little toy frog that came into it. Was a real frog that hopped away, but she didn't have to touch it.
You're very lucky. With Fräulein Helga, it was a snake.
So this is interesting. Actress Norma Varden and her situation here for Sound of Music, because she was up for Mother Superior.
Oh, wow.
And then going with Peggy Wood because the producers changed their minds. So they gave her the Frau Schmidt role as a kind of a apology for not giving her the Mother Superior role. So that's an situation with her. But she, for those of you who are Hitchcock fans, she was in Stranger on a Train. You remember her as the giddy socialite who's almost strangled by Robert Walker. She was in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes as well. And then she found a second career playing like the foil of a lot of comedians on radio, like Lucille Ball and Jack Benny. She was Basil Rathbone's housekeeper in the Sherlock Holmes radio series as well. She was in Mr. Ed, the Beverly Hillbillies, Bewitched, Batman. So quite a lot, and had a recurring role as Shirley Booth's neighbor on Hazel, for those of you old enough to remember Hazel, or maybe have rediscovered Hazel on reruns there on Nick at Night and what have you. So, an actress who spanned quite a lot of decades working in the business, both in radio and on screen.
So we're sitting at the dinner table, and this, by the way, is one of a couple of scenes that was not in the stage play. It's obviously Maria's late. She runs in and sits down and then immediately jumps up.
Yeah.
Because the kids have left a pine cone on her seat.
Enchanting little ritual. Something you learned at the Abbey?
No, it's rheumatism.
She's covering for the kids. And you can see that they realize that she covered for them. Well, it's interesting going back to the thing that they say later on. This is the only way they can get Dad's attention. The point, they expect her to get mad at them. Yeah. And then there's a thing. And then Dad will have to react, but she's not doing that. Yeah. And they all start to eat.
Excuse me, Captain. Haven't we forgotten to thank the Lord?
And what's so great is you can see him go like, I do not like being told what to do.
Right.
I was just eating. And then he realizes he can't fight against a prayer, to the Lord. He can't argue with it.
For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful. Amen.
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 And then they start eating, and then she keeps talking.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you for the precious gift you left in my pocket earlier today.
And you can see them go, oh no, now she's going to tell on them.
Yeah.
But she doesn't.
What gift?
It's meant to be a secret, Captain, between the children and me.
Then I suggest that you keep it and let us eat.
Christopher Plummer is great because he's just so bewildered by what's happening at his dining room table.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I don't understand what's going on here. She knows he's telling her to shut up.
Yeah.
And she doesn't shut up. She says,
knowing how nervous I must have been, a stranger in a new household, knowing how important it was for me to feel accepted, it was so kind and thoughtful of you to make my first moments here so warm and happy and pleasant.
and you could see how just absolutely shitty they all feel sitting around the table.
Yeah.
I think them starting to burst into tears takes it too far.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's just a little, I don't quite believe they would be sobbing at this moment.
You know, but then they are kids and some emotions and whatever. And they might be doing it for attention as well, as you said, from their father, you know. So
well, and what it does, this is, you know, when you're directing, you kind of do this thing of like, the more they push the sobbing, the better Christopher Plummer's reaction can be as he can react to what's going on the table, which totally works.
Yeah.
Fraulein, is it to be at every meal or merely at dinner time that you intend leading us all through this rare and wonderful new world of indigestion?
We end on them crying even louder.
Sobbing. Yeah. Rolf, who's played by Daniel, I think it's Truheit, rides up on his bicycle and rings the door and talks to Franz. And you watch this for the first time, not knowing where these characters are going to go.
Yeah.
But when you watch it again, you start to go like, oh, there's stuff going on here.
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, the fact that they picked this guy who is and blonded his hair and all of that, like immediately, and especially because they present you where the time period is and how where Austria is in the world in terms of geography, you immediately go like, okay, this is going to something, you know?
Yeah.
You sense that for sure.
Well, and just a line from Franz who asks,
are there any developments?
Perhaps.
And that's a weird line, you know? We don't know what that means. There's something that's going on between Franz and Rolf that they're interested in, but we don't know what it is.
Yeah. By the way, I should throw this in. With Daniel Truheit, it's really interesting because he initially was turned down for the role because his hair was brown. So they wanted someone blonde, and his agent ended up calling back, and they got him to dye his hair. But he lives in North Carolina. I think he's still in North Carolina. His son is a very famous tenor. And after this movie, he joined the Marine Corps and served the United States in the Marine Corps after the movie came out. But in his later years, he played Captain Von Trapp a number of times in touring productions in North Carolina and other places, and was profiled for it way back in the 1980s on Entertainment Tonight. So that shows you that this is certainly a film that had an enduring effect on a number of the actors who were a part of it.
I wasn't sure where to bring this up, but I have multiple times gone to see the sing-along Sound of Music at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, cool.
And that is a thing that happens all over the world now, is they do sing-along sound. It started in London, but now they do them in Salzburg. They do them all over the country.
Yeah.
And the Hollywood Bowl is packed, 18,000 people, many of whom are in costume. It's not exactly like going to Rocky Horror, but they definitely have props. They definitely have things they cheer. They have a costume contest.
Wait,
what? Oh, yeah, no. It's a ball. It is a total, I'd seen it 3 times at the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
And it's really, really fun. And I'll tell you, as you would expect, there are people that get cheered and there are people that get booed.
Oh.
And Rolf and the Baroness and Herr Zeller get a lot of boos. And so Rolf maybe more than anybody. I mean, really. And so it's got to be interesting to walk around as that guy who played this kid who at the end is really not likable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Especially
I actually feel bad for
likable, you know?
Yeah. I feel bad for Rolf, frankly. Yeah. Like that's sort of my feeling about him. But man, because he is a hated figure at the sing-along Sound of Music.
Yeah.
You know?
And of course we'll get to it later on, but I mean, it's a commentary on how young men can be influenced at formative years to believe an ideology that they confuse with strength and what it costs them to do that in the long run. So yeah, no surprise that they boo Rolf.
Yeah,
because it's safe to boo Rolf, obviously, because it's just a movie. But still, you know. But dressed up, really? That's amazing. That's amazing,
dude.
Wow.
I will say, you if you go on and just Google "sing along Sound of Music," you'll see all sorts of people in lederhosen and outfits, and I mean, like obviously. I'm not saying anything unheard of to say that there is a large gay community that loves musicals.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And you imagine at the Hollywood Bowl, the sing-along Sound of Music, there are a lot of fabulous costumes and it is a huge celebration of this movie, you know.
Have you seen the curtain lederhosen? The curtains?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Fascinating.
Oh, my God, yes. Of course.
Okay.
And he gives Franz a telegram to bring to the captain. When we go into the dining room, deliver the telegram, and Liesl asks,
Franz, who delivered it?
The young lad Rolf, of course.
Father, may I be excused?
And what's so great is you see Maria noticing that that's happening.
Yeah.
Georg isn't paying attention to it. He doesn't pick up on it, but Maria picks up on it.
Yeah.
And the other thing we find out is that Dad is going off to Vienna to see Baroness Schrader again, and they are not pleased about that. And then that maybe the Baroness is going to come back. And while all this is happening, Maria is totally watching Liesl and all the secretive things she's doing before she leaves. And then when he says who might come back with the Baroness, he says, and Uncle Max. And it's obviously everyone loves Uncle Max.
Yeah.
They're thrilled about that. We are outside. Liesl runs along the water. When she's running along the water, she is in Salzburg. And then as she runs up to this gazebo, she is now in Hollywood on a set.
Has anyone ever actually run like this? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
I don't know. Maybe if you were a little bit more romantic, John.
Wait a minute. You can't accuse me of that.
No,
that's a fair point. That's a fair point. It is.
No, I think we can be very clear. If we're going to have a romantic off between you and me, you're going to win.
Yeah, sadly so. Sadly so. Because I believe.
Why is that sad? You're a romantic sweetheart.
I am amidst all the bluster, it's very true.
Yeah,
it's a very, and by the way, she's beautiful, right? In the film, she's gorgeous, and of course she's in her 20s, so I'm not being like creepy, but it's the thing of the energy you want there of her is this innocence, this wide-eyed innocence, this first love type of energy, and her running in that way kind of gets you mentally or subconsciously into that mode, so that when she catches up to Rolf, they have this really sweet back and forth with each other, and a beautiful duet.
So this is her first movie.
Wow.
And this is the last thing she shot on this movie.
She is so confident in these scenes. So, yeah.
She really is. And this is shot day for night, so it's broad daylight. And she just walks out and she's like, how is this? This can't work. Because she doesn't understand. She hasn't seen how things work yet. So she just couldn't believe it. So when she finally saw the footage, she's like, oh, this is amazing. And she runs out and there's Rolf waiting for her and they embrace.
Yeah.
And Rolf is going.
No, Liesl, we mustn't.
And Liesl is really going, we must. Like her energy is so, let me just say, extremely romantically motivated.
Yes.
Is where Liesl is.
I've missed you, Liesl.
You have? How much?
So much that I even thought of sending you a telegram, just so I'd be able to deliver it here.
And she loves that idea.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, because it's like, Rolf is so oblivious.
Yeah.
It's so unclear. And it's as you said, he is so trying to be a man in the way that he thinks he's supposed to try to be a man.
Yes.
And totally not understanding what's going on with Liesl at this moment.
I'll start it for you. Dear Liesl.
Dear Liesl, I'd like to be able to tell you how I feel about you. Stop. Unfortunately, this wire is already too expensive.
This is not what she wanted to hear.
No, not at all.
Sincerely, Rolf.
Sincerely?
Cordially.
Cordially?
Affectionately.
And then she gives him the big hug.
Yeah.
Because she is a 16-year-old girl who is filled with all sorts of totally romantic notions. Because just as Rolf is not real clear on what's really going on with Liesl, she's really not clear on what's going on with Rolf.
Yeah.
I could come here by mistake. With a telegram for Colonel Schneider. He's here from Berlin, staying with... Oh, no one's supposed to know he's here.
The little, again, I've always said ellipses and things where people don't finish their sentences are always key pieces of what's going on in a story.
Mm-hmm.
Just the little way they're peppering in, like, they're Nazis. Yeah. Nazis are here, and Rolf is dealing with Nazis, but he can't talk about it.
Right.
Don't tell your father now.
Why not?
Well, your father's so So Austrian.
We're all Austrian.
Yeah, we're all Austrian. What does that mean?
I think Rolf is actually a really well-written character.
Yeah.
And so he says,
Well, some people think we ought to be German, and they're very mad at those who don't think so. They're getting ready to. Well, let's hope your father doesn't get into trouble.
and the idea that her father, Captain Georg von Trapp, could ever be in trouble is impossible for Liesl.
I don't worry about him, but I do worry about his daughter.
Me? Why?
Well, you're so...
What?
Well, you're such a baby.
I'm 16. What's such a baby about that?
Before they start the song, the body acting here from Rolf is perfect. Because when she says, what's so baby about that? There is a lifting of the head, a condescending smirk, and then a folding of the knees, or the leg over the other leg on the knee, and the hands come. So in essence, it's like, oh, come on, you're a child, you're a bit of a child, not knowing the difference here. And so he begins the song, but it's of course a song to kind of put her in her place in a weird way, even though you can tell there's affection here between both of them.
Well, I want to focus. This is where there's a reason that Stephen Sondheim learned at the feet of Oscar Hammerstein. That was where he was staying, because they lived like next door at their fancy villas, wherever they were up in New England or something. Is that when Oscar Hammerstein writes lyrics, they're written in dialogue with characters and motivations,
right?
And this is a perfect example. Rolf, his motivation is to be a man.
Yeah.
I want to be an adult and responsible and powerful and all those things. And so I'm taking on that role. Yeah. And part of how I'm going to do that is by saying you're still a girl, even though they're only a year apart in age. They're not that far apart.
Right.
And so he says,
you wait, little girl, on an empty stage for fate to turn the light on. Your life, little girl, is an empty page that men will want to write on.
So what he's saying is, young women don't understand how basically sexually attractive men are going to be, and they are going to manipulate and could hurt them.
Yeah.
And you naive young girls should be very, very wary of that. That is his motivation of that line.
Right.
Right. But then she leans in romantically and repeats his last line.
To ride on.
Which is essentially saying, that's what I want.
Yes.
I want you to write on me, metaphorically.
Right.
You are 16, going on 17. Fellows will fall in line. Eager young lads and roues and cads will offer you food and wine.
He sings all about the men that are going to be abusive and dangerous. They're going to wine you and dine you. And he says, you are unprepared to face a world of men.
You need someone older and wiser telling you what to do. I am 17, going on 18. I'll take care of you.
And he describes her as timid and shy and scared of things beyond her ken. Does she seem timid or shy?
Not at all. And he also says, you need someone to take care of you and control you and tell you what to do, in essence. And she pushes back on that. She just shakes his hand and walks around the tree and makes him chase her till they end up in that gazebo and have the back and forth and rain. So she is pushing back on all his ideas of, shall we say, his outdated, and it's been outdated since the dawn of time, by the way, gender dynamics and this idea that men know more than women and men should control women and men should tell women what to do, which is infantile in so many ways. And I like that the song and the body positionings that they move her into, which is her sitting down, him standing, but her claiming her space and sitting down, and then her standing above him on the bench there. It's showing the changing in the power dynamic, that she is very much her own woman. He is foolish not to see that and not to see the treasure of that. And she eventually convinces him by the end that she has her own strength and her own abilities, but it's this, he comes in with this sexist and misogynistic point of view and is quickly schooled by her that she isn't that,
So I agree with everything you say in terms of her motivation. But what's interesting about the song, and this of course comes from, I've seen this a lot more than you have,
fair point.
is that the lyrics are saying the exact opposite, which is what's so great about it, is that he just said, look, you're a little girl, you're naive, you need a guy to protect you, you don't understand how dangerous men are, you need to be told what to do. And everything you said is totally true about, no, she has her own power, she knows what she wants, she's going after what she wants, she's not actually going to be told what to do by him. Right. But what she says is to reinforce exactly what he said.
I need someone older and wiser telling me what to do. You are 17 going on 18. I'll depend on you.
And then she falls into his arm. What she's doing is she's actually playing to his ego.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
100%.
She is in fact controlling the situation.
Yes.
By telling him he's in control.
Right.
You are such a big, strong man, and I really do need you to protect me.
Right.
As she's manipulating him into getting what she wants.
Absolutely. Showing her, whether he realizes or not, showing her strength. And you're right. She controls the situation to lead to him kissing her instead of her kissing him, which she had been indicating she wanted to do at the beginning of the song. So, yeah.
And then we go into the dance.
Yeah.
So the rain starts to pour down, so they have to run into the gazebo, and they do this absolutely lovely, youthful, romantic dance, running around the benches inside. Yeah. He spins her around, holding her up. So here's what happened.
Yeah.
Charmaine Carr is a good dancer. They rehearsed it, they practiced it, they had it down. And then when it was on the day and they went to shoot, she had been dancing in her practice dancing shoes. And then the costume department pulls out the shoes for the shoot.
The heels, yeah.
And what they didn't do is normally for this particular kind of dance is they would put rubber soles on so you'd have some grip as you're running around in circles on stone benches.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were wet from coming in out of the rain. Probably they weren't. But needless to say, Charmaine Carr slipped right off one of those stone benches and went through the glass and sprained her ankle. Fortunately, she didn't get cut at all. Wow. 0 cuts. But her ankle was pretty severely sprained.
Yeah.
And this is, as I said, this is the very end of the shoot in Hollywood. They got to get this done.
Yeah.
And they wrap up her ankle. And then the doctor comes up and gives her what he says is a B12 shot.
Ooh.
Charmaine Carr says, now, I don't know what was in that shot, but I felt great and danced the whole rest, like did a 12-hour shoot dancing on her messed up ankle and didn't feel any pain at all. And if you watch the older DVD, or maybe it's the VHS version, you can clearly, if you look closely, see that one of the ankles is thicker than the other.
Oh.
And then when they got to the Blu-ray, they did some digital magic and slimmed down the ankle, so you really can't see it anymore. But yeah, she's dancing this on a sprained ankle.
The sequences are fascinating, but I was struck by the sequence of going around in circles on the benches, which is incredible, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's almost like it's a show pony. Like she's a show pony being taken around by...
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder if that's the illusion they wanted people to have, even though this is a song, as you said, that she turns the tables on him and takes control of their relationship. But the way he's leading her around, and maybe because she's letting him lead her around, and they're equals in the way they're going around, because he's not ahead of her, he's not behind her. They're equals in the way they're going around. Maybe that was on purpose to indicate that she's willing to be this show pony for him because she loves him. She's making an active choice as opposed to a choice that's more like being forced upon her, you know?
I think this is a very subtly feminist storyline in this sense, which is that she has totally old-fashioned romantic views about love.
Yes.
She is 16 and super into this kid, Rolf, and she's just buying into that patriarchal structure.
Yes.
Of like, and she, even though she's the one who clearly has the power on some levels in the scene and is manipulating him, she's like, I will be the show pony. I will be whatever you want me to be.
Absolutely.
Assuming, and the thing is Rolf is a character who desperately wants to belong and desperately wants to fall into what he thinks his role is.
Right.
And I really wonder, I wonder about who is Liesl after she sees what happens with Rolf.
Yeah.
Like, how does that experience change her going forward?
Well, like you said, there was a sequel. So I wonder if that sequel, kind of addressed that. But that's an excellent point you bring up, Steve, for sure.
And then you could see them getting closer and closer. And there's no question that she wants that kiss. And Rolf sort of reluctantly is leaning back, and then you kind of see it coming. And then he finally sort of desperately and awkwardly plants one on her lips, which I love. And again, these are all the choices that you make as an actor and as a director.
Yeah.
Is there was a conversation where Charmaine Carr is talking to Robert Wise of like, well, how do I receive this kiss? Are my eyes open? Are my eyes closed? And the choice to make her eyes just wide open as she gets that kiss is so great. And then he pulls away and she is shocked and happy and he runs away out into the rain. And then she completely elated steps forward and in a moment that I find weird but really cute just goes... And that shot of her going wee is the last thing shot in The Sound of Music.
Oh, wow.
So Maria's in her room alone, and this is actually the first thing shot in the film. So we've gone literally from the very last thing shot to the very first thing shot. And in comes Frau Schmidt, who brings her the material to make dresses.
Tell me, do you think the captain would get me some more material if I asked him?
How many dresses does a governess need?
No, not for me, for the children. I want to make them some play clothes.
And you could I think Frau Schmidt does a great job. Because you can totally tell what her feelings about this situation are.
The Von-Trapp children don't play. They march.
Surely you don't approve of that?
Ever since the captain lost his poor wife, he runs this house as if he were on one of his ships again. Whistles, orders, no more music, no more laughing. Nothing that reminds him of her. Even the children.
So there's the whole thing.
Yep. Right there in a nutshell. The placement of this scene is smart in the construction of the movie. Because we've just had this beautiful scene with Liesl and Rolf and the dancing around, and she got the kiss, and she said, so we're in a happy place, right? We're in a much better place. And so we have this scene where we hear about the captain's grief. So we can receive that more honestly. If this had been placed right after the captain had put the whistles and all this kind of stuff, I don't think we'd feel as much sympathy for him. But putting it right after this scene allows us as an audience to have more sympathy for the captain and the story as opposed to raising our eyebrow or questioning it a little bit if they had placed it right after the situation with the whistles or even after the dinner. So to me, this makes a lot of sense to place it here and it allows us to consume it better. And so just as we do occasionally on the show, talk about how films are constructed and how scenes are placed in films for maximum effect. This is one that I think is important to put out because he isn't presented as a guy who's necessarily sympathetic, but in this moment, because we're in a happier place, we can receive it in a much more sympathetic frame of mind when we're watching the movie.
I think that's a great point. And it's like just a general rule when you're writing a script is if ever anything gets too happy, particularly early in your movie, you have to bring in some sadness because that's people don't watch the movie to stay happy. They watch the movie because things are shitty and you hope they get happy. And you're totally right, which is that there's nothing sympathetic about Christopher Plummer when we meet him.
Right.
Right. Like he just seems like this guy seems like a jerk. And that little bit of, it's about the death of his wife.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Just starts to turn on the sympathy just a little bit. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, because we just saw something romantic, and now the death of the wife affecting a man who probably was very much in love with her. We understand that even more now. Yeah.
How do you like your room? There'll be new drapes at the windows.
New drapes, but these are fine.
Nevertheless, new ones have been ordered.
Oh, but I really don't need them.
And Frau Schmidt is heading out, and the fact that the captain is leaving the next day comes up again. And it's very clear that Frau Schmidt has senses a simpatico with Maria right from the beginning.
I shouldn't be saying this, not to you. I mean, I don't know you that well. But if you ask me, the captain's thinking very seriously of marrying the woman before the summer's over.
And Maria's action is totally positive and sincere, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Well, the children will have a mother again.
And you could see so much play on Frau Schmidt's face as she says,
yes. Well, good night.
Good night.
And she heads off. And Maria now gives her nightly prayers next to the bed, and she's praying that she can help these kids prepare for a new mother.
God bless the captain. God bless Liesl and Friedrich. God bless Louisa, Brigitte, Martha, and little Gretel. And, I forgot the other boy. What's his name? Well, God bless what's his name.
Which I think is A, very cute, And B, the reason she says it so loud is that Liesl, who's outside the window, couldn't hear her cue to come in.
Oh, really?
And so Julie Andrews said it louder, so Liesl knew when to sneak in, soaking wet. Because that's how things happen on a movie set. But I also think it's very cute and very funny. And as I said, this is the first shoot. Well, so Liesl, this is her first day of the shoot, which means it is Charmaine Carr's first day on a movie set, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And she is soaking wet, and they had to keep hosing her down.
Ugh.
And Robert Wise kept saying she is not dirty enough, she is not wet enough, and she keeps getting wet. She's like, and it's cold and uncomfortable as she's doing all this. And it's funny too that she started her experience on this movie soaking wet in this scene, and she ended her experience on the movie soaking wet at the end in the scene with Rolf. Then I love, God, Maria is so smart and perceptive because she notices Liesl there, but just keeps going with her prayers and says,
Abbey. And now, dear God, about Liesl. Help her to know that I'm her friend, and help her to tell me what she's been up to.
Are you going to tell on me?
Help me to be understanding so that I may guide her footsteps. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
I think when someone says, let me give you some advice, but does it through a prayer to God that ends in amen, it's kind of more persuasive that way. Even to me, an atheist, that would be more persuasive.
Yeah, for sure.
And Liesl lies and says, she was out walking and then someone locked the door.
Were you out walking all by yourself?
And you see Liesl start to lie by nodding. Yeah. And then she gives up the lie and shakes her head. And this is those moments of choices for a character. So she could say, I'm going to go tell your father, which is what Liesl probably expects will happen, because that's what would have happened in the past.
Yeah.
But instead, she joins the conspiracy and says,
if we wash that dress out tonight, nobody would notice it tomorrow.
She gives her instructions on what to do. Yeah. And of course, part of that is because Maria has been staying out late lots of times. She's done lots of things exactly like what Liesl did at the Abbey,
Yeah. It's fascinating with Charmaine Carr because she doesn't end up becoming a big star, right? She doesn't do much after this film, and yet you're watching these scenes and you're absolutely captivated by her and the believability of her as an actress in these scenes and in these moments. And it's so much of a shame that she never went on to do more acting wise. She actually started a design firm on her own. Michael Jackson was one of her big clients.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. She reunited with the whole cast in 2010 when Oprah Winfrey did a whole Sound of Music 45th anniversary episode. She even recorded Edelweiss with the great-grandchildren of the Von Trapps on an album called Dream a Little Dream by the Von Trapps and Pink Martini. But sadly passed away from dementia in 2016. And so, it's a shame of a situation. She came from a talented family. Both her sisters were actors as well. Shannon Farnan and Darlene Carr. Shannon Farnan is the voice of Wonder Woman in the Super Friends series from the 1970s. So this is the thing that, it's just kind of shocking to me that she never became a bigger actress or never became a bigger name, because she's fantastic in the movie, man. And I'm just so shocked,
So it's interesting. So first of all, while she was there, she filmed I'm going around Salzburg and the sights and sounds of filming The Sound of Music when she was in Salzburg when she was 21 in the 60s, which is it's very typically like you would see that Disney would make a very typical sort of tour made in that era.
Right.
But that she's in like I said, there's a ton of bonus materials I looked at. She's in a ton of it as an older woman.
Yeah.
And seems very connected to The Sound of Music. And she could, and for all the things I watch were probably recorded mostly in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
She's still beautiful and just charismatic as hell in all this stuff. Yeah, I feel the same way. My guess is she didn't want to do it.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe she just didn't want to play the game. She didn't like the game maybe at the end. Yeah.
So she heads off to go deal with her dress. And then there's more thunder and the door slams open and there is Gretel, who is so scared she can't speak.
Well, where are the others?
They're asleep. They're not scared.
And then there's more thunder and then the other girls come in and she brings everybody up on the bed, and I think there's just a moment of like, you're going to let us come on the bed with you? Because I don't think the other governesses did that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Really? Well, just this once. Come on. Now all we have to do is wait for the boys.
You won't see them. Boys are brave.
There's more thunder, and of course, there are all the boys looking very sheepish. Super cute shot of Maria snuggling with all the girls in the bed.
You boys weren't scared too, were you?
Oh, no. We just wanted to be sure that you weren't.
It's very thoughtful of you, Friedrich.
It wasn't my idea. It was Kurt's.
And I love that because it just finishes the button on the earlier joke of
Kurt, that's the one I left out. God bless Kurt.
Julie Andrews is so great.
Well, now, when anything bothers me and I'm feeling unhappy, I just try and think of nice things.
What kind of things?
Oh, well, let me see. Nice things. Daffodils. Green meadows. Skies full of stars. Raindrops on roses. And whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things.
So this is a few of my favorite things we're about to go into. Initially, this is a song sung by the Reverend Mother to Maria to give her the courage to go to the Von Trapp family house.
Oh, interesting.
The song that was initially here in the musical that Maria uses to amuse the kids that are scared of the thunder is The Lonely Goat Herd.
Oh.
I think few of my favorite things work so great here.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant choice to move it. And I don't need the Reverend Mother to sing a few of my favorite things. I think that lessens her.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
One of the things that Robert Wise said is basically nothing but praise for Julie Andrews. First of all, she was professional, on time, intense, disciplined, absolutely a perfectionist and wanting to make sure everything is right that she's doing, and incredibly warm and kind. And in particular, what he said was she was, like being the number one person on the call sheet. Yes, the director is setting the tone. Yes, the AD is setting the tone and the DP and the producer. That number one slot, that star who's in so many scenes as Maria is, they set the tone for the movie.
100%.
And he absolutely felt that she was an ally in particular with the kids.
Yeah.
And it was particularly this scene where, because kids are rough on a set, and she got the kids all having fun and all feeling part of the family and all feeling part of the process. And it doesn't, from what I've heard, and obviously the stories you hear about Hollywood movies are not necessarily the total truth, but the kids were really on board and really, really well behaved. And Bob Wise gave Julie Andrews a lot of the credit for that.
Yeah, and I imagine what happened on the set mirrored what happens in the movie, right? Because as you said earlier about Christopher Plummer, he was much more of a hard ass. And it probably radiated that thing of being kind to them when he wanted to be, but it was that kind of rough kindness where she was much more receptive to them and open to them. So because they were looking possibly for another energy on the set to feel respected by, they gravitated towards Julie and gave her that extra level of respect so they could get it back. And it's so essential for the movie's success, seeing her chemistry with the children. And Steve, we've talked about countless films over the 9 years we've done the show. We've both seen countless films where the chemistry works and the chemistry doesn't. And it's really important for chemistry to work with children, because if you want to buy into what's happening here. And I think you're right. And what they said is right, that the connection is so strong through this song, and you feel it from every one of them. Even Liesl comes in near the end there. You feel the connection that she has with all of them.
When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
And she is singing. Of course, you'll notice the kids are not singing.
Right.
Because the kids don't know how to sing yet.
Oh,
so
right,
when they jump in on their lines, they're speaking a line, but they won't actually really sing the line. And just one of the things that Julie Andrews is doing is, like, anytime, the camera's on her, and she's so charismatic and joyful in everything she does. But when they're turning around and doing the shots of the kids, well, Julie Andrews is standing behind the cameraman, making faces and doing stuff to keep the kids engaged.
Yeah.
So that they look like they're having fun. So there's like shot where Kurt pops up and just has a huge smile. Well, that was Julie Andrews doing stuff behind the camera to get that huge smile to come along.
These are the people we envy in life. The people who know exactly what they want to do with their lives and are constructed to do it, and are not arrogant, condescending, and mean about it, but rather giving and caring, because they just have that natural energy. Some people are just born with this, and it's incredible when you encounter that kind of an energy, especially on the performer side of things, Steve. As we know, a lot of egos get involved, a lot of people's feelings get hurt, things of that nature. But Julie radiated this kind of confidence and was built to be this kind of actress and this kind of energy and force. And maybe she knew it to a degree, and so that allowed her to relax. Maybe she wasn't racked with the kind of insecurities other actors are racked with, and she knew she could give of herself to these performers, to these other actors, and it wouldn't take away from her performance. It wouldn't take away from her status on the set or her status on screen, because a lot of actors get concerned about elevating other actors in their same movies or making other actors feel comfortable because they won't shine as much. And so she's the kind of actress, she's the kind of person that understood that from the beginning, from all the stories you hear about her, from even before Mary Poppins, when she was doing stuff on stage, she had that energy. And so you understand why people have such a reverence for her, both people who knew her and people who are fans of her when they talk about Julie Andrews.
It's all about that song Confidence. It's like Maria makes a decision to, I'm going to be this kind of person.
Yes.
And I feel like Julie Andrews is the same. It reminds me in a weird way of stuff we talked about way, way back when we did Rocky, of like all of the pressure of, okay, he wrote the screenplay. He's really a nobody actor who suddenly has a star. Right. And he made the decision of like, I got to bring it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's Julie Andrews, and that's both the character Sylvester Stallone and the character Rocky.
Yeah.
And it's both to me, Julie Andrews and the character Maria. Like,
great point.
I'm right in the middle of this. I have to bring it. You know, I'm the center. The song is very fun and very cute, and the lyrics are lovely. And as you mentioned, there's the moment where each of the kids are yelling out their favorite things.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what Liesl's favorite thing is that she yells out when she comes out of the bathroom?
No, tell us.
Telegrams.
Yeah. Right, because of what they sang about. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's what brings Rolf to her.
Yep.
And the song is building, and it almost like the song is becoming out of control. Like it started small and cute, and then it's getting louder and louder.
These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites.
And the song cuts out because there is Captain Von Trapp standing there looking, again, fantastic in that green jacket. And everything just goes dead.
Fräulein, did I not tell you that bedtime is to be strictly observed in this house?
Well, the children were upset by the storm, so I thought that if I... You did, sir.
And do you or do you not have difficulty remembering such simple instructions?
And what she should say here is, no, sir, or yes, sir, or I apologize, sir. But instead she says...
Only during thunderstorms, sir.
Which, again, is pushing back just a little. Yes. It's not a hard pushback.
Right.
And then he turns on Liesl and asks where she was after dinner. And Liesl is flailing and fumbling and doesn't know what to say.
What you would like to say, Captain, is that she and I have been getting better acquainted tonight. But it's much too late now to go into all that. Come along, children. You heard your father. Go back to bed immediately.
And she pulls the air out of the conflict with Liesl, saving her again.
Yeah, and she diffuses the situation for the other kids as well with the captain. Yeah.
You have managed to remember that I'm leaving in the morning.
And she nods.
Is it also possible that you remember that the first rule in this house is discipline? And I trust that before I return, you will have acquired some?
And he's done with her.
Yeah.
He's like, and I am the captain.
I've said what I said.
I said what I said, and now I'm leaving, and she is not done with him.
Captain? I wonder if before you go, I could talk to you about some clothes for the children, for when they play.
Maria.
But if I could just have some material.
You are obviously many things, not the least of which is repetitious.
But they're children.
Yes. And I'm their father. Good night.
And he exits. Yeah. So the movie sets up Maria as this person who is filled with joy and life and music and gentle and kind and sensitive.
Yeah.
And that dad is a cold and somewhat scary disciplinarian, totally disconnected from the kids.
Yeah.
The actual eldest Von Trapp daughter, whose name is Maria, said she described her dad as a doting parent who made handmade gifts for all the children and loved singing with them and playing his violin long before Maria ever showed up. On the other hand, she said that Maria had a terrible temper.
Oh.
And from one moment to the next, you didn't know what she would do. And it was like a thunderstorm would come down and was really, really scary. And that you just had to get shelter until the fury passed.
Wow.
So that is how, Maria, the real Maria Von Trapp, was not the Maria Von Trapp in the movie. And the captain wasn't the captain. They're just very, very different people.
So, which is why you should never look to movies for the truth about any historical thing. Yeah.
Well, it's so here's an interesting one. And I wasn't sure where to bring this up. Robert Wise made a very conscious decision. It was part of why he didn't want Maria von Trapp on the set. He's like, I am not making a documentary.
Right.
I don't want to know the truth. I'm making a movie.
Yeah.
And that's what he was focused on, was making a great movie.
Yeah. Well, it's just like Cinderella Man, right? Like the way they portray Max Baer in that movie is not how Max Baer was in real life. And so you have to create for your narrative of your movie. Sometimes you have to adjust facts in order to create that thing that's going to get people to keep watching the movie or come seeing the movie or talking about the movie. And yes, unfortunately, real people will get damaged, especially the estates of these people will be upset about it. But, this is why they say based on a true story,
Well, and to be clear,
yeah,
there was nothing in the deal that any of the money from the movie The Sound of Music or the musical went to the Von Trapp family.
Right. Good point.
Later on, I believe the Robert Wise and they convinced Fox Studios to throw some money the Von Trapp's way, which they did. But they weren't gonna. She sold her rights to her life for $9,000.
There you go.
Yeah. And that's it.
That's it.
So Captain Von Trapp is left. Maria is angry and frustrated with this particular man, and she sits down and thunder is going, and she's kind of looking over the curtains as she's singing a more dissonant version of My Favorite Things.
Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes.
Which is a line about clothing.
Yeah.
She's thinking, you could see her thinking about clothing, and she kind of is touching these drapes, and she looks at these curtains, which I find kind of ugly.
Yeah.
And then she starts to sing, and her performance has that defiance to it.
When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
And even though the lyrics are the same that she was singing so joyfully and happily before, the performance is strong and defiant as she's holding on to those drapes. You can see it as it's like a declaration of war almost in this moment.
Yep, 100%.
And I think as Maria has come up with a plan, which will clearly betray Captain Von Trapp's wishes, I think is a good time to end part one of our exploration of The Sound of Music. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Were you tapping your toes and singing along with this, or was this your first time watching it? And how do you feel about it if it was? You can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for The Cine-Files. You can go on X at Cine_Files, on Instagram at The Cine-Files Podcast. And you can subscribe to the show at all the usual places, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. On Spotify, please leave your comments or reviews. On Apple Podcast, reviews are hugely helpful, and we really appreciate them. As we said before, you can support the show on either patreon.com/thecine-files or Apple Podcasts. You can buy or stream The Sound of Music along with every other movie we've ever reviewed at cinefiles.net. And you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. And I am looking into Blue Sky because I know a lot of people are going there. I got to do that soon too. So maybe I'll have a Blue Sky handle soon.
Yeah, we're definitely going to move the Cine-Files to Blue Sky as well. We've definitely got to create a Blue Sky handle for the Cine-Files as well. So that'll be up to me to get that done as soon as possible so we can start getting some followers on that platform as well, Steve.
And how would people reach you?
Oh, yeah. You can follow me at The Rocha Says. I'm all talking about our stuff. Yeah, you can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, and my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. I can't bang this drum loudly enough. I'm so close to getting to 50,000. If we can get more people to subscribe to the channel, if you enjoy my commentary here, I've got great shows over there as well. And Steve has come on to be a guest on a few of those reviews and what have you. So please come and take a look at what we do there on the Outlaw Nation channel and see if it works for you. Thank you, Steve. And this has been so much fun. Again, as I said at the beginning of this, when I haven't seen a movie, I don't do much research. I like to go on the journey with Steve, and it's always a fun discussion, and I'm enjoying it so far and looking forward to part two.
Me too, and I think you'll come back next week on Friday for part 2 of our exploration of The Sound of Music right here on The Cine-Files.